Chapter 549. The army of the Xinwu dynasty had always been under the control of Lei Qiuxing. Aristocratic families and nobles always had the right to speak in the army. However, people like Lei Qiuming and Yan Xingqi were in the minority. Once something happened to the Xinwu dynasty, the entire army would only listen to Lei Qiuxing's orders. Even if their family members had high military ranks, it would be useless. This was because in the past 100 years, there were many emperors who were better than Lei Qiuxing in terms of governance. However, there weren't many who could surpass him in terms of martial arts. In the eyes of the soldiers, Lei Qiuxing was the one and only god of war. Especially after Lei Qiuming was conferred the title of King Qinping and Yan Xingqi was exiled to the northern frontier, Lei Qiuxing became the #1 person in the army. Therefore, in the Xinwu dynasty, going against Lei Qiuxing was a decision that required courage. This was because if one went against Lei Qiuxing and was caught in the act, one's entire family would be exterminated. Without the support of the army, Lei Qiuxing could kill whoever he wanted. What made Lei Qiuxing afraid was the combined power of all the aristocratic families and sects, not just a single family. The princes of the Xinwu dynasty fought fiercely, and there were many powerful people behind them. However, they only fought to be the most outstanding among the princes and become the successor of the dynasty. No one was naive enough to think that they could challenge Lei Qiuxing's authority. Therefore, at this moment, the crown prince who spoke out and the nobles who knelt on the ground weren't humans anymore. They were dogs. Dogs that were controlled by others. To put it bluntly, they were able to stand among the hundreds of officials in the imperial court of the Xinwu dynasty. They were all existences that could make a region of the Xinwu dynasty tremble with a stomp of their feet. Other than Lei Qiuxing who controlled the army, no one could make them obediently submit to him. Even to Lei Qiuxing, they were subjects and not dogs. Because of this slight mistake, so many people who were at the same level as them became like this. When they thought about how they were almost tempted, how could they look good? Since when did I need your permission to do things? Lei Qiuxing stood up from the dragon throne and looked at the civil and military officials below. He sneered, a bunch of useless people who can't even maintain their selves. To think that I thought that you were all outstanding people and that with your help, the Xinwu dynasty would last for thousands of years to come. But now, it seems that although the rise of the northern frontier was a bit early, it wasn't an accident. With Lei Qiuxing's great talent and bold vision, even those ambitious people wouldn't choose to make a move when Lei Qiuxing was still alive. Therefore, the northern frontier grew from a remote corner that was regarded as a land of exile to a powerful enemy that shook Lei Qiuxing's rule. In Lei Qiuxing's view, this was undoubtedly reasonable and unexpected. However, after the trial of the elixir of immortality, Lei Qiuxing could only silently accept this fact. No matter how vigorous and carefree the civil and military officials of the imperial court were when they followed him, decades of indulgence had eliminated their ambitions and ambitions. Now, these powerful officials only wanted to live forever so that they could sit high above and continue to enjoy the glory, splendor, and wealth that ordinary people didn't even dare to dream of. There was no dynasty in the world that couldn't be destroyed, not to mention that the current higher-ups of the Xinwu dynasty had already been corrupted into a group of rice worms. They could only lie on their books of merit and wait for death. They used their methods to go against their colleagues, against the emperor, and to seek benefits for themselves. Relying on such useless people to govern this great dynasty was no different from slow suicide. As soon as he finished speaking, the civil and military officials of the imperial court and the several princes' expressions became ugly. After all, although the elixir of immortality was a free gift from the Jade Lake Immortal Palace, its essence was still incomparably precious. The Sky Demon could corrupt the civil and military officials of the imperial court and make these high and mighty dignitaries act according to his will, but he couldn't corrupt the entire army of the Xinwu dynasty. Even if he could corrupt some of the generals, it was useless because Lei Qiuxing's imperial edict was much more useful than the general's exhortations. This move of bypassing the officials and directly commanding the army was equivalent to directly commanding the generals. The crown prince, who was still far away from Lei Chouxing, said coldly, "Lei Chouxing, don't forget that you are jackals of the same tribe as us. Even if you want to abandon the dark side and join the light side now, they won't let you go. If you act according to our plan, you will have a chance to live." The crown prince's face was distorted. He didn't look like the crown prince of a country, but more like an evil spirit that had crawled out of hell. Even his voice became hoarse and unpleasant, like the sound of fingernails rubbing against glass, which made people frown unconsciously. However, the crown prince's behavior made those dignitaries who had rejected the elixir of immortality even more certain that after taking the elixir of immortality, even if it didn't show anything on the surface, it was equivalent to losing oneself in essence. This was because the tone and voice of this crown prince didn't sound like the crown prince who was usually praised as a benevolent ruler. At first glance, it was obvious that the creator of the elixir of immortality was using the crown prince's mouth to speak. "Now that things have come to this, you still want to use words to affect my mind. Do you really think that I am a 3-year-old child? I have already ordered the 3 armies to go out to battle. If the Frost Mirror cavalry doesn't retreat, the army won't retreat. Furthermore, I have also explained what the elixir of immortality is and the current situation of the imperial court. I have strictly ordered them to pretend that they didn't see it even if I changed my mind." Lei Chouxing placed his hands behind his back, and his aura was unparalleled. He laughed loudly and said, "Even if you all give me the elixir of immortality now, it will be useless. Even if I am going to die, I will drag all of you down with me." At the same time, Lei Chouxing's aura rose again and again, from the initial stage of the Heaven Star Border Realm to the advanced stage of the Heaven Star Border Realm. It didn't even seem like it was going to stop. It continued to advance toward the Void Realm, as if the bottleneck didn't exist at all. The crown prince still looked at Lei Chouxing with a ferocious expression. After a while, he opened his mouth and sneered, "I understand now. You are not Lei Chouxing at all. You are the shadow by his side. You speak so righteously, but in the face of death, didn't he still choose to run away? However, this is also good. After I kill you and capture Lei Chouxing, the imperial edict will naturally be fake. Cultivation wasn't something that could be achieved overnight. Even if one used heavenly treasures to greatly increase one's cultivation, it was still the same. Some bottlenecks couldn't be overcome, and forcefully consuming spiritual items or pills to increase one's cultivation would only cause one's body to explode. Therefore, Lei Chouxing, who was in the Heaven Star Border Realm, couldn't become a Void Realm expert in the blink of an eye. Therefore, there was only one explanation for the current situation. Chapter 550. 8 hours later. In the meeting room of the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion. Lin Yuan's cold gaze slowly swept across the faces of the 3 people. He said in a cold tone, "So, where is the explanation this king wants?" Luo Su shrugged. No expression could be seen on his bandaged face, but there was an obvious smile in his voice. "Dragon King, in order to participate in the war against Shenwu and Frost Mirror, the embroidered uniform guards even used handymen to clean. If you ask me, I really have nothing to say, because there are no other documents on my desk except for battlefield intelligence, military movements, and the behavior of the generals." Luo Su didn't hide his gloating at all. Although the embroidered uniform guard didn't completely remove themselves from this matter, because of the special circumstances, the embroidered uniform guard didn't have extra manpower to use elsewhere. In addition, the embroidered uniform guard targeted the officials of the Northern Frontier. Their monitoring of the aristocratic families and civilians was naturally not as strong as the association of the Demon Emperor. If Shi Dong didn't have anything to say, then Luo Su naturally had nothing to say. Shi Dong looked at Luo Su expressionlessly. His lips moved, but he didn't say a word. After all, the civilians of the Northern Frontier were the foundation of the association of the Demon Emperor. Whether it was civilians or aristocratic families, they were all under the supervision of the Association of the Demon Emperor. Even those non-official black markets shouldn't exist. But Sherdong sat in this position and didn't do anything. Even if they didn't pursue the matter of the elixir of immortality circulating in the northern frontier, he would still be labeled as incompetent. Therefore, whether the elixir of immortality was pursued or not, Sherdong wouldn't be able to stay in the position of vice president of the Association of the Demon Emperor for long. Especially the intelligence agency under him. Even if he didn't dissolve it, he would have to hand it over to someone else to manage. The moment Lin Yuan showed his blade, he had already become the loser. Although his mind was spinning wildly, Sherdong really couldn't think of any words that could reduce his guilt, let alone exonerate him. Li Zhong expressionlessly picked up the tea leaves floating on the surface of the tea with the lid and said indifferently, "You can't say that. The elixir of immortality is something produced in the Yaoqi Immortal Palace in the south of the Shenwu dynasty. It can't grow wings and fly to the northern frontier, can it? They are secretly circulating in the northern frontier, and the Association of the Demon Emperor is indeed responsible for that. However, there are more than one or two elixirs of immortality. The Northern Battlefront Army has found at least 3,000 elixirs of immortality, and that is not including the ones we didn't find and the ones that were consumed." When he said this, Li Zhong took a sip of the steaming hot tea and said coldly, "If such a large amount of immortality medicine is flowing into the northern frontier, are the embroidered uniform guards intelligence network in the north all blind?" Luo Su was choked by Li Zhong's words, and his face suddenly turned ugly. He originally thought that Sherdong would be the first to make trouble for him. According to his understanding of this old enemy, even if he couldn't get away with it, Sherdong would choose to die together with him. Even before this, Luo Su had already prepared a plan and didn't take Sherdong seriously at all. However, he didn't expect that when Sherdong didn't say anything and looked as if he had accepted his fate, Li Zhong would jump out and start a war. "King of the northern frontier, it's easy for you to say that. Right now, the situation in the north is very complicated. Let's not talk about the Frost Mirror Cavalry and Shenlin Jun's reserves for now. Let's talk about our internal problems. The southern expedition is entrenched in Donglin City. Once Li Zhongxing makes a move, our northern defense line will collapse instantly. The Frost Mirror Cavalry will march straight in. Not only the north can't withstand it, but the northern frontier can't even escape. There's also the Fallen Star Army's Gao Buzhan. Although I don't see anything wrong with him for now, as an old general of the Shenwu dynasty, he is a hidden danger that we must guard against. The entire defense of the Wei River is in Gao Buzhan's charge. Once something goes wrong, the Shenwu dynasty will retaliate with a punch. With the current strength of our northern frontier, we won't be able to withstand it. There's also the southern army stationed in the northern frontier. General Zhang Qilin used to be Shenlin Jun's reserves. His loyalty to Lei Qiuxing is definitely higher than our northern frontier prince's mansion. Once Zhang Qilin has evil intentions and stabs us in the back, all the supply routes will be cut off by him. At that time, the troops sent out will all starve to death on the northern battlefield. Also, the transmission of every piece of information is very difficult. It can't be compared with peacetime. In the past, we only needed 2 channels, one in the open and one in the dark, to deliver the information on time and safely. However, on the battlefield, a piece of information may not reach you safely even if we send out 7 or 8 teams with the help of flying demonic beasts. Luo Su's face darkened. He squinted and said, "The manpower of the Genie Guard is limited. I'm not a genius. I really can't spare people to do other things." Li Zhong coldly glanced at Luo Su, then snorted coldly and continued to drink his tea. Luo Su stood up and knelt down in the hall. He faced Lin Yuan and said in a deep voice, "I've failed the Dragon King's trust. Although I'm not the main person responsible for the elixir of immortality, I can't absolve myself from the blame. Please punish me, Dragon King. Do. Dong's fingers tapped rhythmically on the back of the chair. He said in a strange tone, "Yes, you're indeed not the main person responsible. If the genie guard had fulfilled their duty, the elixir of immortality wouldn't have entered the northern frontier, and it wouldn't have been traded under my nose. So I'm the main person responsible, right? You." Luo Su glared at Dong with a murderous look. The elixir of immortality trade took place on the northern frontier, so Dong couldn't escape the blame no matter what. But then again, if the genie guard hadn't chosen to be perfunctory, how could such a large amount of the elixir of immortality be transported to the northern frontier? It's still the same sentence. The elixir of immortality couldn't have grown wings and flown in. Luo Su spoke with difficulty, but it was the duty of the embroidered uniform guards, and the investigation of the people entering and leaving the north was also the duty of the embroidered uniform guards. A few light words would not be able to cover it up. Dong's meaning was very clear. If they had to die, then everyone would die together. Lin Yuan didn't remain silent like he had in the previous meetings. Instead, after the three of them had finished speaking, Lin Yuan said faintly, "This king wants an explanation, not, who will bear this responsibility." As his voice fell, the three of them became serious, and their eyes gradually turned cold. If they really wanted to talk about responsibility, none of them could escape. And the explanation Lin Yuan wanted obviously wasn't as simple as someone paying with their life. What he wanted was a feasible method to find the sky demon hidden in the northern frontier and destroy the elixir of immortality. Li Zhong and Luo Su both looked at Dong's face at the same time. After all, it wasn't important what they said, but the intelligence work inside the northern frontier still depended on Dong and his Demon Emperor Association. Chapter 551. Dong took out a small white porcelain bottle and poured out a metal pill. He said coldly, "Although the Association of the Demon Emperor didn't nip this matter in the bud, please don't treat us as incompetent people. When the elixir of immortality gradually spread in the northern frontier, I personally led people to follow up on this matter." When he mentioned incompetent people, Dong's tone was obviously heavier, and his gaze fell on Luo Su's face. The elixir of immortality matter indeed had nothing to do with him. When this forbidden item that Lin Yuan and Li Zhong had repeatedly ordered to be excluded from the northern frontier appeared in the northern frontier, Dong felt his heart turn cold. In a trance, he even saw his own death. However, Dong had taken over the intelligence work of the Association of the Demon Emperor for a long time after all. He wouldn't neglect his work because of his emotions. Therefore, after a short period of shock and fear, Dong quickly began to investigate this matter. However, the more he investigated, the more Dong feared the mastermind behind the elixir of immortality circulation in the northern frontier. This was because the other party had unknowingly created a terrifying protective umbrella. No matter how Dong investigated and collected evidence, he only caught some Tom, Dick, and Harry. These people who were secretly arrested by the Association of the Demon Emperor didn't even know about the whole plan. They were just second-hand sellers of the elixir of immortality. Even the person who supplied them behind the scenes was an unsolved mystery. However, in this short period of investigation, Dong had completely understood how terrifying the other party's power was. Not only did the local government obstruct the Association of the Demon Emperor's actions, the underground forces that had previously submitted to the Association of the Demon Emperor attacked the investigators at all costs. After a few days of confrontation, the total number of deaths from both sides had exceeded 4,000, and this didn't include those who had to withdraw from this big show due to injuries. What made Dong's heart palpitate the most was that as his investigation deepened, he even noticed that a large number of members within the Association of the Demon Emperor were involved in the distribution of the elixir of immortality. This was because whether it was the progress of the investigation or the traces of his own group, they seemed to have been in the hands of the other party. This had nothing to do with their abilities. It only proved that the other party had pawns within the Association of the Demon Emperor, and their position was not low. He didn't know how many members of the Association of the Demon Emperor had taken the elixir of immortality, nor did he know how many of those who didn't take the elixir of immortality but were working with the mastermind behind the elixir of immortality purely for profit. There were fewer and fewer people who were worthy of Shi Dong's trust, and the frequency of confrontations between the two sides was getting lower and lower. Meanwhile, the circulation of the elixir of immortality was also getting more and more frequent. It was no longer a private transaction within a small circle. It had even appeared openly in some unofficial black markets. Zhang Qilin and his men had only obtained a very small batch of the elixir of immortality after wiping out the black markets. Shi Dong had seized and destroyed even more of it. However, the Association of the Demon Emperor was still huge and powerful, but the spies that Shi Dong could mobilize were getting fewer and fewer. From an open confrontation between the two sides, Shi Dong's men could only follow far behind those traders, counting the list of trades and who was involved. At present, Shi Dong had a list of names in his hands. Although he wasn't sure how many people on the list had taken the elixir of immortality, he was sure that at least 9 out of 10 people on the list had not been wronged. Of course, there might be some innocent people on the list who had been implicated. Although they were quite suspicious, they had never participated in the trade of the elixir of immortality. They had only been in frequent contact with those who bought and sold the elixir of immortality. There were still more participants who hadn't been investigated. This was certain. Therefore, Shi Dong had been busy with this matter during this period of time. He didn't dare to slack off at all. To put it bluntly, such a big thing had happened at the northern frontier. As the president of the Association of the Demon Emperor who was responsible for intelligence and spies, he couldn't absolve himself from the blame. But if he did it well and gave Lin Yuan an explanation, even if he had to die, it would be him. If he didn't do it well, he would just sit around in the office and wait for death, or degrade himself to wallow in the mire with the other party. If that happened, Shi Dong wouldn't be the only one who would die. Therefore, before the elixir of immortality was circulated in the world, it had always been in the form of private transactions. Each transaction might only have 3 to 5 elixirs of immortality. But during the period when President Shi was fighting with the other party and was crushed by the other party, the trading range of the elixir of immortality began to gradually expand. There were even cases where a batch of elixirs of immortality had reached the scale of thousands of elixirs of immortality. Li Zhong's eyes flickered, as if he was thinking about something. He murmured, "But if that's the case, President Shi, why did you choose to face those traders directly, and didn't inform the Wang residents of the northern frontier first?" Li Zhong's voice was somewhat meaningful, as if he really didn't understand Shi Dong's actions, but also seemed to be hinting at something. Shi Dong smiled helplessly and said, "Wang residents of the northern frontier, it's not that I want to measure the heart of a gentleman with my own yardstick, but the elixir of immortality is too strange. Not to mention informing the Wang residents of the northern frontier, I didn't even reveal any information to the higher-ups of the Association of the Demon Emperor. Because before the answer is revealed, no one knows who is loyal to the northern frontier." Speaking of this, the bitter smile on Shi Dong's face deepened, and he continued, "From the very beginning, when the suppression by force failed, I knew that this wasn't a problem that could be solved with weapons. I could only sneak in to investigate, make a list of as many people involved in this matter as possible, and wait for the Dragon King to deal with it. Since that's the case, involving a third party or a fourth party would only make things more complicated. The other party's protective umbrella didn't just play the role of protection. Whether it was the real confrontation with Shi Dong, or the elixir of immortality being sold directly to the black market from private transactions, although it didn't comply with the laws of the northern frontier, its influence was indeed getting bigger and bigger, and the scale of the sales was also getting bigger and bigger. But all of this, the only person who knew the truth was Shi Dong, who personally followed up and investigated. Whether it was Luo Su, who was the commander-in-chief of the embroidered uniform guards, or Li Zhong, who was in charge of Shunning City, they only knew that the elixir of immortality had appeared, but they didn't know that the elixir of immortality had been circulating in the northern frontier for a long time. This already explained a lot of problems. Nourishing things silently. The other party's way of selling the elixir of immortality in the northern frontier's market could be said to be the difference between heaven and earth, but there wasn't even the slightest bit of information in between. Either the seller of the elixir of immortality was extremely skilled, and used a special method to conceal the elixir of immortality, or the various government offices of the northern frontier had been completely infiltrated by the elixir of immortality. In other words, if the northern frontier was compared to a plant, then the northern frontier at this moment might have already rotted to the roots. Chapter 552. The northern frontier would be rotten to the core. From beginning to end, this matter was within the expectations of Li Zhong and Lin Yuan. The appearance of the elixir of immortality had only accelerated the process, causing everything to happen much earlier. Li Zhong's face was gloomy as he said hatefully, "If what President Shi said is true, then the biggest problem in the northern frontier right now is those aristocratic families. I said at the beginning that these guys are wolves that can't be tamed. No matter how badly they are beaten, as long as there is a chance, they will still choose to betray their masters. This is their nature, and it can't be changed at all." As a child of a poor family, Li Zhong had never had a good impression of the aristocratic families, especially in the series of actions against them. The one who had led the various suppression plans had always been Li Zhong, but Li Zhong was not satisfied with the behavior of the aristocratic families with their tails tucked between their legs. Because from the beginning, Li Zhong had never prepared a way for these aristocratic families to survive. However, there were obviously capable people in the northern frontier aristocratic families. At the beginning, they had resisted Lin Yuan's reforms, but later on, they had even taken the initiative to use their own power to solve some of the hidden dangers of the northern frontier's reforms. This had allowed some of the aristocratic families in the northern frontier to survive. Later on, under the instigation of Kong Lezin, the aristocratic families in the northern frontier openly rebelled. Li Zhong had thought that this was an opportunity to wipe out all the aristocratic families in one fell swoop, but at the last moment, some small and medium-sized aristocratic families had rebelled, taking the initiative to help the northern frontier army to wipe out the large aristocratic families that were stubbornly resisting. After that, they had paid a considerable price to preserve their family's inheritance. Now, with the elixir of immortality, anyone with a discerning eye would know that the aristocratic families in the northern frontier played a dishonorable role in this. First of all, with the status and position of those aristocratic families, cultivation and strength were not enough to make them obsessed. Otherwise, they would not be aristocratic families, but sects that were even more extreme in terms of martial strength. What these aristocratic children were truly obsessed with was wealth and power. In a situation where they had both, they were willing to pay a high price in order to pursue the so-called immortality. Even those big shots from Lin Yuan's previous life, who could shake the entire continent with a stomp of their feet, couldn't escape from this. Even the royal family, who was the head of the various dynasties and generations of aristocratic families, were crazy about the existence of the elixir of immortality, because they hoped that they could live forever, to be able to control their own wealth and power forever. In his previous life, the elixir of immortality only existed in legends, yet it was sought after to such an extent. If the elixir of immortality really did appear in the Sky Martial continent, how could it not be coveted by the aristocratic families? If we investigate from the perspective of the aristocratic families, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, after being rebuked by Li Zhong, Luo Su, who hadn't been able to catch his breath, returned to his work state at this moment, and said this with a solemn expression. The North was now a battlefield. Ordinary aristocratic families didn't have the ability to pass through the main roads guarded by the various armies in the North. Only the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce had the ability and confidence to do this, and only the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce could maintain trade with the Shenwu dynasty at this juncture. The elixir of immortality wasn't difficult to obtain. After all, The Jade Lake Immortal Palace had taken out a large amount of the elixir of immortality to give to the cultivators who relied on the Jade Lake Immortal Palace. In addition, the Jade Lake Immortal Palace also had the intention of pushing the elixir of immortality to the south. Therefore, the merchants of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce only had to express their intentions and they would immediately be received by the upper echelons of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace, and receive a large amount of free elixir of immortality. Regardless of whether these merchants of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce were still human after leaving the Jade Lake Immortal Palace, it wouldn't affect their thoughts of transporting the elixir of immortality back to the northern frontier to sell. This was because anyone with a little bit of business insight could see that the elixir of immortality was very profitable in the market. Only those kinds of pills that could ignore bottlenecks and increase cultivation, or those that could increase aptitude, could compete with the elixir of immortality. And it was very clear that the latter actually wasn't as competitive as the elixir of immortality. It was even a heaven-defying divine medicine that had a price but no market. Even if one had money, it was useless. If one couldn't buy it, one couldn't buy it. In terms of supply, it was far inferior to the elixir of immortality. Although Lin Yuan had repeatedly emphasized that the elixir of immortality wasn't allowed to appear in the northern frontier, it couldn't stop the merchant's nature of pursuing profits. At worst, if Lin Yuan really didn't allow it to be sold publicly, they could use their influence to make private transactions or directly sell it in those illegal black markets. Not only was it secretive and safe, but without the Northern Frontier Prince's Mansion's commission, the profits would be even higher. To be more realistic, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce was no longer the small chamber of commerce that had to rely on Lin Yuan to survive in the early days of its establishment. Even if their trade routes were still in the hands of Lin Yuan, they had secretly contacted many powerful demonic beasts. Even if they had offended Lin Yuan, they still had trade routes to use in the Hingduan Mountains. It was just that it was no longer as safe, the cost of transportation was higher, and the time it took to transport goods was also longer. In other words, Lin Yuan was no longer the only partner of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. However, the existence of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce at least supported nearly two-thirds of the capital expenditure of the northern frontier. Once the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce collapsed, at least 80% of the projects in the northern frontier would be stopped, and a large number of refugees would have nowhere to go. The wealth that Lin Yuan had seized from the north was all used to maintain the situation in the northern frontier. It was impossible to continue the construction of the Great Wall that had already been planned. This was a bloody fact, and it was also something that Lin Yuan and Li Zhong had to solve, but they couldn't do so for the time being. In the original plan, Lin Yuan had intended to use the method of boiling the frog in warm water to slowly eliminate the threat of the aristocratic families and the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. After all, the children of the aristocratic families were the absolute main force of the northern frontier's officials. Without these people, even Shunning City would be out of control, not to mention the remote local officials. It was even possible that a situation of feudal lords would rise up together. After all, training a qualified official was a long and arduous process. First, one had to learn theoretical knowledge in the Northern Frontier Academy. After passing the test, one would be assigned to various government offices to accumulate experience. Only after accumulating experience over time could one become a qualified official. It would take at least 3 to 5 years to train an official who could govern a place. This was also the time needed to change the blood of the northern frontier. On the other hand, the young generals of the Northern Frontier's military academy were a different matter. They had studied in the military academy for countless years, and their theoretical knowledge was unrivaled. Therefore, they only needed to learn the basic art of war and strategy, as well as some common code words of the northern frontier, and they could be sent to various troops to be polished. The real famous generals were all trained on the battlefield. No one had heard of any of them learning in the military academy. If there were such people, it would be due to their natural talent, and it wouldn't have much to do with the Northern Frontier Academy. Therefore, when it came to changing generals, Lin Yuan could be capricious. However, when it came to changing officials, Lin Yuan had to be patient. Chapter 553. As for the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, it was indeed a problem at the moment, but for the future Lin Yuan, it could be easily dealt with. They dared to go against Lin Yuan because they had already grown up. In the Hingduan mountain range, Lin Yuan wasn't the only beast king that cooperated with him. However, they forgot that Lin Yuan was still a monster beast. Therefore, although the northern frontier was ruled by Lin Yuan, it wasn't his base. The ones that Lin Yuan could truly trust were the mountain-shaking ape clan in the Stoneclaw Forest and the monster beasts created by the system. In time, when Lin Yuan became the new Beast King or developed the Stoneclaw Forest to the same scale as the Green Marsh clan, no matter how much the Beast Kings favored the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, they would still stand on Lin Yuan's side. Firstly, they were the same kind as Lin Yuan. There was no need for them to compete with Lin Yuan for benefits. That would only damage the monster beast's strength. Secondly, if the Stoneclaw Forest really became a force that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Green Marsh clan, then other than the three Beast Kings, no one would dare to provoke Lin Yuan. Both of these were problems that needed time to be slowly dealt with. However, due to the appearance of the elixir of immortality, these problems had erupted much earlier than Lin Yuan had expected. Moreover, they had reached the point where they had to be dealt with as soon as possible. This was why they had become such a thorny problem. Who is in charge of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce now? Lin Yuan's voice was a bit hoarse. It seemed that he wasn't in a good mood. Sherdong carefully glanced at Lin Yuan. After confirming that this Dragon King didn't have any intention of harming anyone, he replied, "It's Chairman Su who is in charge of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce." Originally, there were two vice-chairmen involved in the operation. However, ever since Chairman Su formed a cooperative relationship with several desolate Monster Realm Beast Kings, the two vice-chairmen were kicked out of power. Lin Yuan was silent. Chairman Su was referring to Su Nan. They could be considered the second batch of humans that Lin Yuan had encountered after arriving in this world. Due to his sudden outburst of kindness back then, the Lu family had sent out cultivators to capture him and bring him back to Zhongshan City. Furthermore, they had been facing endless troubles. This had thoroughly infuriated Lin Yuan. After he had gained a foothold in the Hingduan mountain range, he had led the demonic beasts to massacre Zhongshan City. Su Nan was a wandering martial artist who had sought refuge with the Lu family. Between Lin Yuan and the Lu family, the choice he made was to save his own life. Lin Yuan could still clearly remember that Su Nan had pushed his brothers into the horde of demon beasts in order to buy him 2 or 3 seconds to escape. In order to establish the association of the Demon Arch, Lin Yuan had let Su Nan off and had even been supplying him with spiritual items and other resources. That was how he had the conditions to rule the northern frontier. Lin Yuan's evaluation of Su Nan had never been high. Although he was capable and could perfectly complete the tasks that Lin Yuan had given him, he was still a selfish person. As long as there were enough benefits, there was nothing that he couldn't sell out except for himself. Therefore, after the northern frontier had gradually stabilized, Lin Yuan did not hesitate to kick Su Nan out of the northern frontier's authority. Although he still had the title of the Association of the Demon Thearch as president, the actual authority had been transferred to Ding Zai, Sherdong, and other promoted vice presidents. Lin Yuan also had the idea of making use of trash and sent Su Nan to the position of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce's president. Facts had proven that there was no problem with this decision. This could be seen from the fact that the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce had raised the banner of the Northern Frontier's economy. A selfish, unscrupulous, and wealthy Chamber of Commerce president had saved the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce a lot of detours. Furthermore, he had quickly repaid Lin Yuan in order to secure his position. It was just that Lin Yuan, who knew the deep-rooted bad habits of humans, had never trusted Su Nan. This was because unlike other people, Su Nan's heart was so dark that Lin Yuan had personally experienced it. Now that the authority of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce had fallen into Su Nan's hands alone, and the two vice presidents that Lin Yuan had arranged to keep Su Nan in check had been kicked out of the authority level. This was enough to prove that Su Nan had already found a backer and was fearlessly planning to go against Lin Yuan. It was just that before the matter of the elixir of immortality broke out, Su Nan had never revealed his ambitions, making people think that he was just fighting for power. However, from the current situation, Su Nan's ambitions were as clear as day. He had long been in cahoots with the Sky Demon, similar to the relationship between Lei Chuxing and the Sky Demon. Capture him for me. Lin Yuan took a deep breath. His heterochromatic eyes swept across Sherdong's face, but he sighed softly in his heart. Some problems had to be faced sooner or later. Lin Yuan used to be like a normal person with rich emotions, but after a good deed created endless trouble for himself, Lin Yuan had been resisting those unnecessary emotions. Therefore, when it came to his subordinates, Lin Yuan had never taken any conciliatory measures, inciting the various factions to oppose each other while maintaining the balance of power between the various factions. Therefore, when Lin Yuan was asked to purge his subordinates, Lin Yuan was not moved at all. This was because from the beginning, he had no feelings for these subordinates that had helped him conquer the world. Therefore, Lin Yuan would not overdo things like Zhu Yuanzhang, nor would he be like Chai Rong, who had given Zhao Kuangyin the chance to usurp the throne because of his high regard and admiration. However, it was also because Lin Yuan had treated his subordinates as tools that these people did not approve of Lin Yuan from the bottom of their hearts. They instinctively thought that the northern frontier being where it was today was all due to their efforts, and that Lin Yuan was just relying on his own strength to suppress their demonic beasts. With such a mentality, the entire northern frontier had fallen at an unusually fast speed. First, there was Lei Fan and Hu Yen fighting for power, and now, Su Nan was willing to betray the northern frontier for his own benefits. Lin Yuan wanted to reflect on himself, but laughably, he found that he could not do that at all. Because he was a demonic beast, no matter how well he did, it was meaningless. Just like how the citizens of the northern frontier knew that the northern frontier today was all because of Lin Yuan's series of reforms, but no one really liked Lin Yuan. In their hearts, Lin Yuan was still a boorish demonic beast. Therefore, when Li Zhong was ordered to carry out the land confiscation, Li Zhong was quickly hailed as a wise ruler, a hero by the citizens of the northern frontier, but no one mentioned Lin Yuan's contributions in the slightest. Those who are not of my race will have different hearts. This sentence was rather impactful. But what about when you are of a different race? Especially Lin Yuan, who had the body of a demonic beast, but the soul of a human being. It had to be said that Lin Yuan was indeed tempted by the system's suggestion. It was not purely for the sake of obtaining the power of incense, but more so because he had accumulated too much resentment in his heart that he needed to vent. Only by letting these people know that their happy lives today were all because of Lin Yuan's existence, and if they denied this point, what awaited them would be a world of purgatory. Only then would Lin Yuan be able to vent the resentment in his heart. Chapter 554. It seemed that the association of the Demon Emperor had been secretly fighting with the people behind the elixir of immortality during this period of time. Even in the relatively peaceful Shunning City, there were still many spies from the association of the Demon Emperor hiding there. It took less than half an hour to find Su Nan's whereabouts and bring him to the prince's mansion in the northern frontier. To everyone's surprise, Su Nan seemed to have expected this day. Not only did he not resist, he even stopped the guards around him. Then, he very calmly followed the association of the Demon Emperor's spies to Lin Yuan. Luo Su crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked at Su Nan expressionlessly. When he was the commander of the mountain-blocking city's garrison corps, he had fought with the association of the Demon Emperor more than once. However, after he joined Lin Yuan's side, he gradually lost his respect for the association of the Demon Emperor. Therefore, he had never carefully understood Su Nan, the founder of the Association of the Demon Emperor. The elites of the Association of the Shifter Emperor had already been split up. Needless to say, the embroidered uniform guards and Knight Bus Ho, Xia Xiu's assassin criminals, and Shaoan's demi-human army were also the mainstays of the Northern Territory. The current Association of the Shifter Emperor was nothing more than an empty name. Most of its members were recruited from defeated organizations, or members who weren't moldable enough were kept in the Association of the Shifter Emperor. The cadres and leaders of the past were now characters that could shake the entire northern region with a stomp of their feet. Naturally, Su Nan, the guild leader, had gradually retreated behind the scenes. A person like this was naturally not worthy of much attention. However, not worthy of attention and not paying attention were two different things. The responsibility of the embroidered uniform guards was to monitor the local government agencies. The Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, an organization that controlled the economic lifeline of the northern frontier, was naturally under the name of the Prince's Mansion in the northern frontier. It could not be compared with the Association of the Demon Emperor, which was almost reduced to a civilian organization. Therefore, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce had always been under the supervision of the embroidered uniform guards. At the same time, the embroidered uniform guards, who were used to monitor the local government, were a new team. They were not used at all. Even though the war in the north was in full swing, these people were still carrying out their duties and were not transferred to the front lines by Luo Su. If there was really a problem with Su Nan, it meant that Su Nan had completed this series of operations right under his nose. This not only put a huge blame on Luo Su, but also made him feel like his face was burning. It was as if the monitors he had selected were all useless. "President Su, do you know why we're looking for you?" Li Zhong glanced at Lin Yuan, who was resting with his eyes closed. When he saw that the latter had no intention of speaking first, he cleared his throat and took the initiative to speak with Su Nan. Su Nan was silent for a moment. The corners of his mouth rose slightly, and a sinister smile appeared on his face. He said in a deep voice, "Su Nan is not a good person. I've done countless dirty things. There seems to be only one thing that could make President sure of the Demon Emperor Association, Commander Luo of the Embroidered Uniform Guards, and our Northern Frontier King come to investigate me at the same time." Speaking of this, the sinister look on Su Nan's face grew stronger. He said word by word, "No. Death. Medicine." As his voice fell, Lin Yuan slowly opened his eyes. A cold light flashed in his heterochromatic vertical pupils. Li Zhong, Sherdong, and Luo Su's breathing stopped at the same time. They stared blankly at the sinister and awe-inspiring Su Nan. After a moment of silence, Luo Su was the first to smile. He tilted his head and said, "So, President Su should still have a lot of trump cards in his hands. Otherwise, I don't." Su Nan smiled and looked at Luo Su's face. He directly opened his mouth and interrupted him. At the same time, Su Nan lifted his collar and said with a smile, "If I had a trump card in my hands that I haven't used yet, why would I allow myself to be captured and enter this certain death situation? Although I feel that you don't have the guts to kill me." Luo Su's eyes were cold. He looked like he was about to explode. Li Zhong took a few steps forward and slowly raised his right hand in front of Luo Su. He said coldly, "President Su is right. However, it's not that we don't have the guts to kill you. It's just that there's no need to kill you. I have to say that I overestimated you. I thought you were the same as Lei Qiuxing. You chose to cooperate with Sky Demon. But now it seems that you're just an abandoned pawn." Su Nan casually pulled a chair and sat down. He didn't seem to be affected by Li Zhong's words, but the smile on his face clearly froze. He dared to appear here, of course, not because he had seen through life and death, but because he had exposed himself. He had no way of dealing with Lin Yuan's thunderous fury. So he didn't bother to make unnecessary resistance. It was better to put himself out in the open and make Lin Yuan hesitate to attack the person behind the scenes. As for confidence, many of the aristocratic families of the northern frontier, the officials of the northern frontier, and the members of the various organizations of the northern frontier had taken the elixir of immortality. Lin Yuan didn't have the ability to kill a river of blood. But if there was a possibility of sitting down and negotiating, Lin Yuan would have to lower himself and have a good talk with Sky Demon. This way, he would have the chance to struggle for survival between the two sides. Don't make it sound so unpleasant. You call me an abandoned pawn. Is His Highness in a much better situation than me? The smile on Su Nan's face gradually disappeared. He slowly said, without me, there would be no Yao Emperor Association, and there would be no Black Jiao to rule the northern frontier. His Highness is where he is today because of me. But I don't care about His Highness's gratitude. After all, you and I are the same. We're both pawns on the chessboard. Whether it's an abandoned pawn or a decisive player, we can never become chess players. At this point, the smile on Su Nan's face completely disappeared. He changed the topic and said coldly, how do you know that I am not His Highness's tomorrow? Luo Su's and Sherdong's expressions were a little uneasy. Back then, Su Nan had been Lin Yuan's right-hand man. But the result couldn't be said to be bad, but it wasn't good either. The Demon Emperor, who was created by Lin Yuan, would be torn apart by Lin Yuan. In the past, those who had to respectfully call him president were all on an equal footing with him in terms of status, and the power in their hands was even more terrifying than his. Although he was sitting in the position of the president of the Chamber of Commerce in the northern region, how much influence could a Chamber of Commerce made up of the major families in the northern region exert? And the situation that Su Nan had faced back then was very similar to the situation that they were facing now. When the northern frontier needed spies, Sherdong had been in the limelight. Later, when the northern frontier gradually stabilized, the embroidered uniform guards suddenly appeared and scattered Sherdong's power. Now that the two tigers were fighting, no one could be sure that they would be the winner. Chapter 555. Su Nan had always been a dark person, and his ability was not bad. Having been in the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce for so long, the skill of stirring up discord was self-taught. After finishing his words, Luo Su and Sherdong's hearts were shaken. If Su Nan were to add fuel to the fire, perhaps Luo Su and Sherdong would be pulled to his side. However, Li Zhong obviously would not give Su Nan this chance. Chairman Su's eloquence is not bad, but it's a pity that your heart is too dark. Although I dare not say what will happen in the future, I can be sure that what Chairman Su is today will not be my tomorrow. From the beginning of the Northern Frontier's establishment until now, it is still like a newborn baby. However, when it comes to me, the power has changed to the third batch. Some people are silent, some people are rising, and some people are dying without a burial place. Could it be that Chairman Su still does not understand that we actually have no power? Everything we have is given to us by the Dragon King. If the Dragon King is unhappy, we are nothing. The death of Lei Fan and Hu Yan, the two kings of the northern frontier, can be said to be the trend of the times. It can also be said that they were seeking their own deaths. If they knew their position from the beginning and did not have those delusions that they should not have, they would still be the kings of the northern frontier. Li Zhong clasped his hands behind his back. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he mocked. Guildmaster Su can be considered a senior figure in the northern region, but in the end, he still couldn't overcome the barrier in his heart. With two examples in front of him, he still walked the path of death. Oh. Su Nan raised his eyebrows, and his face was a little gloomy. He sneered and said, "The Shifter Emperor Association was founded by me. For the Black Jiao to be where it is today, Su Nan, must have worked hard, right? But I can't be the king of the northern frontier. Even the Shifter Emperor Association was broken up, and I was even kicked out of the northern frontier's power. First, the Imperial Secret Service was established, and then 2 vice presidents were stuffed in. Wasn't it that the Black Jiao could not tolerate me, Su Nan? From a certain point of view, Su Nan was right. After all, whether it was the top forces or the 6 great dynasties, none of them were willing to see the demonic beasts that had been suppressed for so many years suddenly rise up, and even leave the Hingduan Mountains to occupy human territory and still live like fish in water. However, Lin Yuan took a shortcut. He did not directly rule the northern frontier, but pushed out a puppet-like king of the northern frontier. In this way, even if the other forces were dissatisfied, when they did not have the courage to fight with Lin Yuan to the point of mutual destruction, they could still use the excuse that the king of the northern frontier was a human to numb themselves. They even felt that as long as Lin Yuan died in the future, the northern frontier would quickly return to human rule. That was why they left the northern frontier as a nail to disgust Lei Chuxing. If it wasn't for the fact that the top forces thought highly of Lin Yuan, the other 6 great dynasties would have already sent out their own cultivators to assassinate Lin Yuan when they saw that the Shenwu dynasty was weak. Therefore, the reason why Lin Yuan was able to rule the northern frontier was because of the existence of the Association of the Demonic Emperor. In the subsequent rewards, the leaders of the Association of the Demonic Emperor were gradually divided, forming the various factions of the current northern frontier. However, Su Nan, the great contributor who created the Association of the Demonic Emperor, was not given any rewards. He was even kicked out of the Association of the Demonic Emperor and became the president of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. In the beginning, Su Nan thought that he could earn a lot of money by sitting in this position, so he endured it. However, after Lei Fan and Hu Yan, the 2 kings of the northern frontier, were killed and imprisoned, Su Nan saw hope. After all, at that stage, there were not many people who were suitable to take over the position of king of the northern frontier. Su Nan was definitely the most powerful contender. However, Lin Yuan's choice was Li Zhong. As a person who had a dark heart and valued personal gain, Su Nan could calmly watch Lei Fan and Hu Yan die one after another. Because at that time, he knew very well that the title and authority of king of the northern frontier would not fall on him. However, when this authority was placed in front of him, he could no longer remain calm as a wise man. Therefore, working together with the Sky Demon to overthrow Lin Yuan's rule became the only way for Su Nan to take revenge on Lin Yuan. Pitiful and very sad. Li Zhong shook his head in disdain. After a moment of silence, Li Zhong said slowly, "You were the one who created the Shifter Emperor Association. However, what does the association have to do with you? All the resources were provided by the Dragon King. You only gathered those fugitives who wandered outside the rules, and turned them into mercenaries who would risk their lives for profit. What makes you think that without you, there would be no Shifter Emperor Association?" Su Nan's eyes slowly widened as he looked at Li Zhong in disbelief. Shi Dong stood up from his seat and said with a faint smile, "Whether you admit it or not, as long as you have the same resources, anyone can establish the Shifter Emperor Association at that time. And a true wise man will make the Shifter Emperor Association into something that belongs to him." Bullshit. Su Nan roared in a low voice, his eyes red as he looked at Shi Dong and roared, "Who do you think you are? At that time in the Shifter Emperor Association, you were just an outer member. The reason why you are where you are today is because of Black Jiao's favor. Your position, your power, all of it should have been mine, you thief." If Su Nan hated Lin Yuan, then for Shi Dong, other than hatred, he also felt jealousy. Because the Shifter Emperor Association was created by him single-handedly, while Shi Dong took over the place and used the association's resources to raise himself from a lowly outer member to one of the vice presidents of the association. Moreover, He was a person with real power who stood side by side with Ding Zai. Back then, when the two of them stood together, even he, the president, had no say. Later on, when Ding Zai's identity was exposed, he was sent to the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. In such a huge shifter-emperor association, the only one who had the final say was Sherdong. But all of this should have belonged to him. Sherdong, one of the biggest spies in the northern frontier, was just a thief who stole his position and power. If the Dragon King needed mercenaries, with the amount of resources he offered, he could mobilize all the demon slayers and professional mercenaries in the northern frontier. Don't talk nonsense about humans and demons being irreconcilable. In front of absolute benefits, anyone would bow down. Moreover, the demon slayers and mercenaries in the northern frontier are existences that live on the edge of blades and blood. As long as the price is high enough, why would they care if the employer is a demon? Sherdong's lips curled into a mocking smile as he mercilessly attacked. Your ability isn't bad, at least you can pull the Shifter Emperor Association up under the suppression of the 7 border cities. But in my eyes, you are still a complete piece of trash. The Shifter Emperor Association in your hands and mine are 2 completely different organizations. Chapter 556. Shut up. Su Nan's face became more and more ferocious, like a demon from hell baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. You're just a thief. Everything you have should belong to me. Everyone has the right to teach me a lesson, but you don't. Sherdong sneered and said slowly, whether you admit it or not, the Shifter Emperor Association in your hands is just a mercenary organization that has no loyalty to the Dragon King. It's even a group of outlaws who are used to wandering outside the law. It's not even comparable to those professional mercenaries or demon slayers. At least those people know what they can touch and what they should avoid. At this point, Sherdong spread out his hands and said calmly, but the Shifter Emperor Association in my hands is an intelligence organization that makes people tremble in fear. They have unquestionable loyalty to the northern frontier and the Dragon King. They can obtain first-hand information at any time, and they can turn part of the information into a large amount of wealth. I can be where I am today not only because of the Dragon King's grace, but also because I deserve this grace. Li Zhong crossed his arms in front of his chest again and said with a cold gaze, the Shifter Emperor Association's eyes and ears failed several times in a row, causing a series of tragedies. It was also your doing, wasn't it? Back then, you controlled the largest intelligence organization in the northern frontier, but you only knew how to use it to scheme against others. At this moment, Su Nan could no longer say anything to refute. He could only helplessly protect his head and let out meaningless roars. In the end, Su Nan had not changed at all. Even if he was the president of the Shifter Emperor Association and the president of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, deep in his heart, he was still the despicable person who would push his brothers to the herd of beasts for his own survival. The reason why he could communicate with the upper echelons of the northern region, the nobles of the 7 dynasties, and the rich merchants was not because he was successful, but because he had been hypnotizing himself. He believed that his success was all due to his outstanding ability, and that his wealth and status were all earned with his own hands. But Sherdong and Li Zhong's actions were no different from rubbing salt on his wound. The creation of the Shifter Emperor Association. Even if it was someone else, given enough resources, they would still appear. In other words, even without Su Nan, the association of the Demon Emperor would still be the association of the Demon Emperor. It might even be a better association of the Demon Emperor. However, without the association of the Demon Emperor, Su Nan would still be a wandering martial artist. After offending the Liu clan, he wouldn't even be able to return to Zhanshan City. He could only take the risk and venture into the Hingduan mountain range to head to other regions. How would the Demon Emperor make use of him? The Fiend Emperor Assembly in Sherdong's hands was completely different from the Fiend Emperor Assembly in his hands. This was because Sherdong had indeed turned the council of the Demon Emperor into his own subordinates. Without Lin Yuan's orders, Sherdong's orders were absolutely effective within the council of the Demon Emperor. Otherwise, an organization similar to a mercenary organization would not be willing to take such a huge risk to challenge the embroidered uniform guards who were responsible for monitoring the northern frontier. Sherdong and Li Zhong cooperated and used the power of words to break down Su Nan's psychological defenses. They even denied the truth to a certain extent, constantly instilling one thing into Su Nan: without Lin Yuan, you are nothing. A person who relied on self-hypnosis to maintain his temperament would not be able to withstand such methods. Therefore, Sherdong and Li Zhong had perfectly achieved their goal, to completely break down Su Nan's psychological defenses. At this moment, Luo Su, who had been waiting at the side for a long time, suddenly took a step forward and grabbed Su Nan's wrist. His eyes turned and emitted a cold light. Then, Luo Su's voice slowly rang in Su Nan's ears like the whisper of a demon. From this moment onwards, your heart is hell. What you see and hear next will be the things you fear the most. Before you break free from this fear, your body will become my puppet for me to use. You will say whatever I want you to say and do whatever I want you to do. Luo Su's cultivation method also came from the war treasury and was very suitable for this torture expert. The secret technique he was using now was called Divine Power Prison. It could drag the victim into an eternal illusion and make the victim repeat the things they feared the most over and over again until the victim could completely overcome this fear or the caster released the secret technique. During this period, the victim would be a puppet. Any request made by the caster would be unconditionally carried out by the caster. Even if the caster wanted him to die, he would not blink an eye. It sounded like a very powerful secret technique, but the conditions to use it were extremely strict. The victim had to be in a state of mental breakdown to use this secret technique. Otherwise, once the victim showed any signs of resistance or struggle, this secret technique would instantly feed back to the caster, causing the caster to experience the fear that came from the depths of their heart over and over again. Even if the victim could hear and remember the last sentence before falling into the illusion, it was meaningless. Fear was something that was extremely difficult to overcome, not to mention the fear in the depths of one's heart. It was something that even one's soul would tremble after seeing it. Anyway, when Lin Yuan first drew this secret technique from the war treasury, although the introduction did not say how many people had been affected by this technique, there was not a single person who could break free from the control of this secret technique. Using this secret technique, Luo Su kept a large number of puppets. And now, Su Nan had become one of them. Seeing Su Nan's forehead full of cold sweat and his face pale, Luo Su let out a long sigh of relief. He reached out and pressed Su Nan's head to lift his eyelids. After confirming that the light in Su Nan's eyes had completely faded, Luo Su nodded in satisfaction and retreated to the side. Li Zhong thought for a moment, then asked with a dark expression, "How many people have taken the elixir of immortality?" Luo Su repeated Li Zhong's question. Su Nan frowned slightly and seemed to struggle for a moment. Obviously, this question was an absolute taboo in Su Nan's heart. However, a secret technique was a secret technique. Su Nan's struggle was completely meaningless. Soon, he began to spit out the names of people who could make the ground tremble with a stomp of their feet in the northern frontier. At first, the names were all big shots, but soon, in addition to these big shots, the names of some civilians and servants who were used to test the elixir were also reported. Even so, the faces of the 3 people present were abnormally dark. After all, nearly 40% of their subordinates had taken the elixir of immortality. Although their authority was not directly taken away, there was no difference in essence. Under such circumstances, it would be strange if their expressions were good. After Su Nan finished reporting the name list, Li Zhong rubbed his chin and asked, "Are you sure it's only these people?" Chapter 557. Su Nan didn't struggle this time. Instead, he gently shook his head and said, "I'm not sure, but that's all I know. Or rather, that's all the people I'm in charge of. Although I'm not sure, this list is definitely fake. There are people who have been wronged, and there are also people who have been left out. This list was jointly written by 4 collaborators. Just like how I didn't report the entire list, the other 3 probably hid something as well." Li Zhong frowned slightly. He turned to look at Lin Yuan and said in a deep voice, "There are many people with power in the northern frontier, but there aren't many who can be used as protection. If Su Nan isn't Sky Demon's only collaborator, I'm afraid." Luo Su slowly let go of Su Nan's wrist. There was also a hint of fear in his eyes. He said in a deep voice, "I'm afraid that not only are the people outside suspicious, but there are also collaborators on Sky Demon's side, including the 3 of us." It wasn't easy to break down Su Nan's psychological defenses. He originally thought that he could dig out the mastermind behind the elixir of immortality through Su Nan, but now it seemed that Su Nan was indeed a worthless abandoned pawn. There were 3 collaborators like him in the northern frontier. The Sky Demon was an expert at stirring up people's hearts. They lived in the hearts of living creatures and used their words to sow discord. They could make people erase their self-awareness and become their carriers. "You guys can leave first. Li Zhong, stay behind." Lin Yuan opened his mouth, his gaze paused on Su Nan for a while, then he continued, "The heavenly demon may have done something to Su Nan, otherwise, he would not be so relieved to throw Su Nan to us as an abandoned pawn, so don't ask questions that are too straightforward. Try to beat around the bush and see if you can get more information from Su Nan. Of course, even if you get the information, you have to think about it again and again, because it may be a misunderstanding caused by the heavenly demon deliberately misleading Su Nan. For this matter, you 2 should work together." "Yes." Luo Su and Sherdong cupped their fists at Lin Yuan, then grabbed Su Nan, whose eyes were unfocused, and started to walk out. After the 2 of them left, Lin Yuan turned to look at Li Zhong and said indifferently, "The Jade Lake Immortal Palace's palace master might have fled to the northern frontier. You can ask Qin Yu and Zhao Guangcheng about his specific appearance. Scrape him out for me as soon as possible. That's right, unless it's absolutely necessary, don't kill them. The Sky Demon is essentially a spiritual body. Once their physical body dies, they can turn into formless objects and escape. It'll be even harder to catch them then." Li Zhong was slightly startled. He looked at Lin Yuan with a blank expression and asked doubtfully, "You believe that I have nothing to do with the Sky Demon?" The Shifter Emperor Society and the embroidered uniform guards had been sent away, so this matter fell entirely on Li Zhong and his palace guards. In this way, Li Zhong had a lot of room to move around. So even now, Li Zhong still felt like he was in a dream. Lin Yuan didn't even do the most basic screening and just gave him the most difficult, but also the most rewarding, mission. Could it be that Lin Yuan never considered that he, Li Zhong, could also be the Sky Demon's collaborator? A true wise man wouldn't ask such a stupid question. Lin Yuan waved his tail lightly and walked towards the backyard, leaving Li Zhong alone in the wind. Li Zhong raised his eyebrows slightly. His expression was a little uncertain as he carefully considered the key points. Li Zhong had always been dissatisfied with the Shifter Emperor Society and the embroidered uniform guards opposing each other. Now that Lin Yuan had given him the power, he could directly ask Luo Su and Sherdong to move their offices to Shunning City. Moreover, on the basis of the palace guards, he could establish a real third intelligence organization. Although his authority wouldn't be as great as the embroidered uniform guards and the Shifter Emperor Society, he could control the life and death of the 2. On this basis, Li Zhong's authority would rapidly increase and he would become the true king of the northern frontier. It could even be said that from then on the northern frontier, only Lin Yuan had the right to give him a hard time. The fruits of victory were indeed delicious. However, if he wanted to keep the fruits of victory for a long time, Li Zhong had to find the palace master of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace before the situation completely deteriorated. He also had to find other protective umbrellas in front of the embroidered uniform guards and the Shifter Emperor Society. This task could be said to be extremely difficult. Thinking of this, Li Zhong began to ponder over Lin Yuan's inexplicable trust. However, soon, a thin layer of cold sweat slowly seeped out from his forehead. Because he suddenly realized that Lin Yuan's behavior wasn't out of trust, but was actually flattering him to death. First, he treated him differently from Shi Dong and Luo Su, which was enough to make the two of them dissatisfied. If he established an intelligence agency that was above the two of them, then he would be completely pushed to the opposite side. This idea was in line with Lin Yuan's style. He would let the factions under his command fight and kill each other, and then mediate between them to maintain a delicate balance. The reason he received so much imperial favor from Lin Yuan was obviously not because Lin Yuan thought highly of him, but because Lin Yuan had always been promoting him. Not only was he looking forward to this day, but Lin Yuan was also looking forward to this day. Just like those bankers who set up gambling games, they would always only have the problem of how much they won. They would rarely lose money or even suffer a loss. Lin Yuan was such a banker. Therefore, Li Zhong also clearly realized that even if his plan was carried out 100%, he wouldn't be the winner in the end. Instead, he would become a chess piece placed by Lin Yuan and become the fulcrum to balance the two major intelligence agencies in the northern frontier. He would let the northern frontier, where undercurrents were surging, return to the previous calm. Furthermore, it is also impossible for me to cooperate with Sky Demon. Li Zhong let out a long breath and wiped the cold sweat on his forehead with his hand. He forced a bitter smile on his face. The elixir of immortality was something that was pushed out after Sky Demon was exposed. In other words, in order to promote the elixir of immortality, they took the initiative to expose their existence to the eyes of the top forces. If it was a secret cooperation with a high chance of success, Li Zhong might be a little interested in using Sky Demon. However, Sky Demon's self-destructive behavior made Li Zhong clearly realize that this was simply a pirate ship that was about to sink. Except for those guys who coveted the elixir of immortality, no one with a clear mind would choose to cooperate with Sky Demon at this time. Thinking of this, Li Zhong's face became a lot redder. He bowed in the direction Lin Yuan left and walked out. Although being able to become Lin Yuan's chess piece was not something to be proud of, as one of the top officials in the northern frontier, Li Zhong believed that it was not a bad thing. As long as he was still useful, there was still room for him to make mistakes. He would not be abandoned by Lin Yuan without hesitation because of some mistakes. Chapter 558. Lin Yuan, who saw this scene through the eye of the god, smiled slightly and sped up his movements. He had always been puzzled by the Sky Demon's self-destruction, but he was sure that this matter would not affect the northern frontier for the time being. Otherwise, the palace master, who seemed to have a high position in the Sky Demon, would definitely not enter the northern frontier. Those top forces could easily tear him to pieces if they set their eyes on him. After the elixir of immortality was popularized, the Sky Demon's tentacles gradually penetrated the northern frontier. Even if a large number of troops from the northern frontier were converted, they were still a group of inferior Sky Demon. The help they could provide to the palace master when he fought against the top forces could be said to be negligible. The palace master was obviously not the kind of person who did not care about life and death. Otherwise, he would not have abandoned his subordinates and fled alone. The brainstorming didn't last long. Lin Yuan's face showed a touch of doubt. Soon, a figure in ragged clothes appeared in Lin Yuan's sight. With just a cursory glance, he could see that there were more than a dozen wounds on this person's body that had not been treated. A large amount of blood flowed out, making his skin look extremely pale. However, this person seemed to feel no pain. He slowly knelt in front of Lin Yuan and said in a deep voice, "Yi Buyao's nameless wandering horse greets the Dragon King." Lin Yuan's heterochromatic vertical pupils flashed with a faint light. He asked, "What's the matter?" The Xinwu dynasty's troops in the Central Plains have all retreated to the vicinity of the imperial city. They are directly facing the Frost Mirror barbarian troops who have plundered the Central Plains. There are no signs of acting. The two sides did not even have a small-scale confrontation. The two armies collided with each other. The army of the Xinwu dynasty did not have the slightest intention to retreat. With the divine martial heavy steps as the foundation, they continued to advance, as if they wanted to drive the Frost Mirror cavalry back to the grassland. In addition, according to the information from Zhang Xiu's subordinates, there are also problems within the imperial city. It seems that Lei Qiuxing has been held hostage by the evildoers and has not appeared in the imperial city for a long time. Taking advantage of this gap, the evildoers found someone who looked similar to Lei Qiuxing and impersonated Lei Qiuxing to order the whole army to fight. That's why this battle happened. At present, the Xinwu dynasty is still trying their best to find Lei Qiuxing. As for the impersonator of Lei Qiuxing, although he has the cultivation of the Kongming realm, he was besieged by many experts in the imperial city. In the end, he ended up without a corpse. However, that battle was quite tragic. Many cultivators living in the imperial city saw it. That person does look 70 to 80% similar to Lei Qiuxing, and his cultivation is also in the Kongming realm. Nameless bowed his head slightly and told Zhang Xiu all the information he knew. Lin Yuan did not have much doubt about the information sent by Yi Buyao. After all, the only requirement for Yi Buyao to join the army was to enter the enemy's camp and investigate. The members of Yi Buyao could obtain information in any way, but their only rule was that after obtaining the information, they had to confirm the accuracy of the information themselves and then report back to Lin Yuan as accurate as possible. As a member of Yi Buyao who did not participate in the internal dispute of the Xinwu dynasty, it was not difficult to explain where Nameless injuries came from. This guy probably crossed the battlefield where the Frost Mirror cavalry and the Xinwu heavy infantry fought, and he personally went to the imperial city of the Xinwu dynasty to investigate and collect evidence. He did not even have time to treat his injuries before he hurried back to the northern frontier to meet Lin Yuan. Got it. Lin Yuan nodded slightly. Immediately, a soft white light swept out from Lin Yuan's heterochromatic vertical pupils and instantly enveloped Nameless' body. In almost the blink of an eye, Nameless' injuries were completely healed. For loyal subordinates, Lin Yuan has never been stingy with rewards. Nameless is not the name of this ranger, because in this special team of Yi Bus Ho, everyone's original name has been erased and replaced with a number composed of numbers. To outsiders, except for the leader of Yi Bus Ho, Yi Balan, all the Yi Bus Ho rangers are nameless. The reason why Nameless had risked his life to investigate and come to meet Lin Yuan without stopping was that when their information was delivered to Lin Yuan, they would receive a reward that was even more coveted than phase, wealth, and techniques, attribute points. Apart from Lin Yuan himself, no one knew that these Yi Buyao, who were of the same origin as the embroidered uniform guards, were all humanoid creatures created by Lin Yuan using human limbs and the system. They might not be absolutely loyal to Lin Yuan, but the law engraved in the depths of their souls prevented them from doing anything to harm Lin Yuan. At the same time, they could also directly receive attribute points from Lin Yuan. The greater the value of the information, the more attribute points they could receive. These few pieces of information had brought Nameless a total of 300 free attribute points, which was enough to make Nameless the second or even the first echelon of Yi Buyao's ranger formation. If the northern frontier was overturned one day, then Yi Buyao would be the only team worthy of Lin Yuan's new appointment. It was not because they were created by Lin Yuan, but because the creatures created by him had a deceptive growth rate. If they wanted to become stronger quickly, they could only count on the attribute points bestowed by Lin Yuan. In addition, Bureau Chief Yi asked me to pass you a message. During this period of time, there have been many suspicious people active in the monster forest. They seem to be collecting fays, but the information from the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce is that these people have nothing to do with the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. The fays they collected were also not traded to the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. According to our further investigation, these people might be living in the monster forest. However, if we continue to go deeper, we will be easily exposed due to the lack of human traces. Thus, Bureau Chief Yi had no choice but to stop following them. Nameless felt the huge amount of attribute points pouring into his body, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. However, at this time, Nameless still did not forget his superior's instructions. At this time, Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly, and his eyes revealed a contemplative look. He had never been able to figure out how such a large number of elixirs of immortality had flowed into the northern frontier. If there were only a few or a dozen of them, there was still a possibility that they had been smuggled in. However, there were thousands of elixirs of immortality. Even if the embroidered uniform guards were not serious in their work, they would not choose to test whether their superiors would discover that they were blind. Once this kind of thing was discovered, it would implicate their family members. Now, the information from Yi Balan's side made Lin Yuan realize that he had been tricked. It was not a clever trick. Regardless of the composition of the elixir of immortality, it was a kind of elixir. Since it was an elixir, it was something that could be refined. Chapter 559. Why did it have to be transported from the Xinwu dynasty? As the largest producer of spiritual objects in the Tianwu continent, the Hingduan mountain range was much better than the artificially cultivated spiritual objects, even though the number of spiritual objects in the Hingduan mountain range could not be compared with the artificially cultivated spiritual objects in the Hingduan mountain range. No matter how unorthodox the prescription of elixir was, it could be obtained from the Hingduan mountain range. Therefore, the elixir of immortality circulating in the northern frontier was refined in the northern frontier. Then, the palace master of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace would not choose to hide in the gathering place of the northern frontier. He was hiding in the demonic beasts forest outside the Hingduan mountain range. There is a path to heaven, but you don't take it. There is no door to hell, but you choose to come here. Lin Yuan was so angry at Wu Ming's behavior that he gritted his teeth. Lin Yuan stopped thinking and looked at Wu Ming for a moment. Then he said in a deep voice, "Go back and tell Yi Balan that when he finishes his work, he can come to me to get 300 attribute points. In addition, I will deal with the matter in the demonic beasts forest. You keep an eye on the Xinwu dynasty. Once there is any change, contact me immediately." "Yes." Wu Ming bowed his head again, and his forehead was close to the ground. It seemed that he was showing his respect to Lin Yuan in this way. Lin Yuan directly rose into the air, turned into a black flowing light, and rushed to the area where the Stoneclaw forest was located. The change in the Xinwu dynasty was not worthy of his attention. After all, it was a new force in the northern frontier, and it was in a situation where the sects and aristocratic families were suppressed. However, it was still corroded by the elixir of immortality. Although the Xinwu dynasty only had a few decades of history, the huge aristocratic families and sects in it were almost hundreds or thousands of years old, and there were even more ancient existences. Under the temptation of the elixir of immortality, the more ancient and powerful the aristocratic families were, the easier it was for them to fall. Not to mention that the Xinwu dynasty was controlled by the Sky Demon. Even the fact that Lei Chuxing could still struggle and order his troops to force the Frost Mirror cavalry to retreat was already beyond Lin Yuan's expectation. However, judging from Lei Chuxing's behavior, it seemed that he was not willing to be used by the Sky Demon and become an abandoned pawn like Su Nan. Although he had no chance of turning the tables, he still planned to use this method to annoy the Sky Demon and weaken the Sky Demon's power. In a short period of time, the Sky Demon probably did not have the spare strength to attack the northern frontier. Therefore, Lin Yuan only needed to complete the infrastructure in the northern frontier as soon as possible. Then, when the Xinwu dynasty's army completely collapsed, he could compete with the Sky Demon. Just like during times of chaos, those aristocratic families would not place their chips on the dukes who had no chance of winning. Lin Yuan did not need to send troops to help the Xinwu dynasty. This was because Lei Qiuxing had already become the first loser to be eliminated. The Sky Demon, the guardian of the Heavenly Gate, and even the other 6 great empires would not allow Lei Qiuxing to continue living. This was because other than the northern frontier, Lei Qiuxing was a complete traitor to all sides. A traitor was not worthy of sympathy. Since he had bet everything he had on the gambling table, no one would pity him when he lost everything. Everything that happened today was his own fault. Everything was his own choice. At the same time, Lei Qiuxing, who was hiding in a deep cave, was wrapped in a piece of animal skin. He was bored to death as he fiddled with the bonfire in front of him with a dry branch. The Tianwu continent was vast and boundless, but he sorrowfully discovered that there was no place for him in this world. He did not need to know about the news from the imperial capital and the army. This was because from the moment the shadow revealed his lineup to buy time for him, the shadow's fate had already been decided. This brother who was born and raised with him but was not related by blood was definitely going to die. The Sky Demon would not be able to bypass him and control the Xinwu dynasty's army unless he was captured by the Sky Demon. This was the confidence of a military god. There are still 3 more days before we reach the Wei River. Lei Qiuxing warmed himself by the bonfire as he silently calculated the remaining distance. Even though he was the ruler of the Xinwu dynasty and the military god of the Wangjian dynasty, he was still a cultivator who had never left the mortal world. Just by relying on his 2 eyes, he could not differentiate between a human and a Sky Demon. Thus, before he met Lin Yuan, he could not appear in front of anyone, even if that person was a trusted aide that he valued greatly in the past. This was because he could not afford to gamble. Thus, Lei Qiuxing could only choose some small uninhabited mountain paths to travel. As a result, the journey was greatly shortened. During the day, he still had to avoid the hunters and herbalists, so he could only choose to travel at night. Thus, Zhang Xiu could travel from the imperial capital to the northern frontier in half a day, but Lei Qiuxing needed a full 5 days. With a blood feud on his back, Lei Qiuxing could not hide his identity and live an ignoble existence. He wanted the Sky Demon to pay the price. A ruler could not be fooled. However, after Lei Qiuxing carefully thought about it, he once again sadly discovered that the only person who could help him take revenge was Lin Yuan. This Black Jiao who took advantage of his internal and external troubles to continuously annex territory was his mortal enemy. However, at this juncture, Lin Yuan had suddenly become his only hope for revenge. At this moment, Lei Qiuxing's ears twitched. The sound of horse hooves suddenly came from outside. Almost instinctively, Lei Qiuxing reached out and pressed down on the Son of Heaven's sword beside him. His resolute face revealed a look of vigilance. Sky Demon's side had never given up on capturing him. Up until now, Lei Qiuxing had already encountered 5 groups of Sky Demon. 2 groups had not discovered him and had only ridden past his hiding place. However, the other 3 groups had discovered him. After a bloody battle, Lei Qiuxing had barely managed to break out of the encirclement. In order to prevent the enemy from locking onto his path, he had even wasted a lot of time turning around randomly. Now, the enemy had come again. Thud, 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 the heavy footsteps came closer and closer. A fine layer of cold sweat appeared on Lei Qiuxing's forehead. Before the Son of Heaven's sword was unsheathed, Lei Qiuxing suddenly realized that he had made a fatal mistake. During this period of fleeing, he didn't have much energy to care about the details. When he heard the sound of horse hooves, he should have immediately extinguished the bonfire in the cave. Otherwise, the other party only needed to take a look outside the cave to determine that someone was hiding in the cave. "Ha, you are indeed here." Suddenly, a familiar voice rang out. A moment later, a burly figure wearing silver armor slowly appeared in Lei Chuxing's sight. Seeing this familiar figure, Lei Chuxing's eyes inexplicably showed a touch of bitterness. Chapter 560. The army of the Xinwu dynasty, the Frost Mirror Cavalry, and the rebel army in the south were locked in a fierce battle. Under such circumstances, the northern frontier, which had been in the eye of the storm, inexplicably got out of trouble. Kai Yan and the Frost Mirror Cavalry tried their best to gather the defeated soldiers who had fled from the northern battlefield. They did not mention anything about the 13th prince, which made Li Zhong, who had prepared a lot of excuses, dumbfounded. However, he was not a wretch. Since the other party did not mention it, he would not choose to provoke them at this time. In this strange atmosphere, the Frost Mirror Cavalry slowly withdrew from the northern territory, leaving behind a group of cattle and sheep as compensation. No one knew what had happened on the Frost Mirror grassland, but one thing was certain. The Shuangjin dynasty, who had thought that they were the victors, suddenly became the losers. Now, not only did they not want to cause trouble for the northern frontier, but they were also afraid that the northern frontier would not be willing to let this matter go. Moreover, it was said that the Frost Mirror Cavalry, which had been wreaking havoc in the central plains of the Xinwu dynasty, had begun to show signs of withdrawing. Therefore, either something had happened on the side of the Shuangjin dynasty, such as them knowing the truth, or something similar. Or, the Shuangjin dynasty was not in a good situation at the moment and did not want to continue fighting with the northern frontier and the Xinwu dynasty. Lin Yuan, who had been silently watching all this, did not express his opinion. However, a hint of worry flashed through his heterochromatic vertical pupils from time to time. This situation did not seem to have happened naturally, and it was not caused by Lei Chuxing's struggle. This strange situation, which seemed to have happened naturally, reminded Lin Yuan of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace's palace master, who was currently hiding in the monster forest to refine the elixir of immortality. It seemed that everything had happened as she had predicted. Those overseas cultists were led by Lin Yuan to the Xinwu dynasty, and the Sky Demon took advantage of this situation to establish the Jade Lake Immortal Palace. Then, they planned to extend their evil claws to the Shuangjin dynasty. The result was unclear, but the Jade Lake Immortal Palace's palace master hid in the monster forest as if she was not worried that she would be affected at all. In addition to her self-destructing behavior, Lin Yuan could not help but wonder if the northern frontier was really safe, or if they had been pushed into a bigger and tighter net. The plan for the Great Wall and the fortifications along the river have to be sped up. Even if the northern region is temporarily safe, we can't let our guard down until all the troubles are eliminated. At the same time, we have to increase the intensity of our internal investigations. I don't want my every move to be watched by certain people. In the next few days, I will leave a projection in the northern frontier prince's mansion. If anything happens, you can report to me immediately. Also, other than those who took the elixir of immortality, there are also people like Su Nan who did not take the elixir of immortality, but participated in the operation of the umbrella. Deal with them all the same way you dealt with the Sky Demon. Lin Yuan whispered to Li Zhong beside him. From time to time, Li Zhong would nod his head to show that he understood. Then, Lin Yuan's huge body turned into specks of starlight and disappeared beside Li Zhong. 10 minutes later. Monster Forest. Lin Yuan floated up from the lake below his lair. His pair of heterochromatic vertical pupils were brimming with vigor. As a rare holy flower, the green leaf aqua lotus had taken root in his lair. Although its growth was still slow, a fae of this level never needed to force itself to adapt to the environment. Wherever its seed landed, it would use all kinds of methods to transform the place where it took root into a suitable place for its growth. For example, Lin Yuan's lair was originally just a place with a good topography. Other aspects were simply not worth mentioning. Even with a rare holy flower seed taking root, its initial evaluation was only In the past year or so, in order to create a suitable environment with high spiritual energy for its growth, the seed of the green leaf aqua lotus spared no effort. Now, Lin Yuan's lair had become an incomparably terrifying spiritual energy gathering array. Any spiritual energy that drifted to this area would be firmly locked in by the green leaf aqua lotus. Because of this tyrannical style, Lin Yuan's lair at this moment, in terms of spiritual energy density, it was not the slightest bit inferior to the lairs of the desolate demon realm in the depths of the Hengduan mountain range. In Lin Yuan's knowledge, perhaps only the monster royal court, which was regarded as a holy land by countless demon beasts, could compete with this lair in terms of spiritual energy density. In the vicinity of Lin Yuan's lair, the area where the green leaf aqua lotus grew could be said to be full of water plants and green shadows that covered the sky. All kinds of precious medicinal herbs that were sought after by mortals in the secular world were no different from weeds here. With a casual glance, one could find a large area. The most exaggerated thing was that under the nourishment of a large amount of spiritual energy, the swimming fishes in the lake were clearly still beasts that had yet to develop intelligence, but their size and strength were countless times more terrifying than their counterparts in other places. Was a carp with a body length of nearly 7 meters rare? Not rare at all. In Lin Yuan's previous world, a carp of this size would be considered a monster. It would be an existence that would cause scientists from all over the world to gather to observe and study. However, in the Tianwu continent, where demon beasts existed, a 7-meter carp was not rare. This was because demon beasts that were tens of meters long and hundreds of meters long could be seen everywhere. It was just that everyone had inherited a method from their bloodline to reduce their size. Otherwise, even if the rocks and plants in the Hengduan mountain range could cover the sky for ordinary people, they would not be able to cover the bodies of high-level demon beasts. In the eyes of these demon beasts, a 7-meter-long carp was only enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. However, what surprised Lin Yuan was that this 7-meter-long carp had not even entered the spirit awakening realm. It was still a completely ordinary beast. Aside from its size and strength, there was nothing special about it. Looking at the big carp that he had brought to the shore, Lin Yuan was silent for a moment. He suddenly remembered that when he had just arrived in this world, he was probably just a small earthworm in the eyes of this carp. Hiss! Lin Yuan sucked in a breath of cold air. In a place with such dense spiritual energy, even ordinary creatures were so terrifying. If a demon beast were to cultivate here for a long time, just how heaven-defying would its growth be? The demonic beast imperial court was such a place. When the incubus was still a child, it had built its own nest in the demonic beast imperial court. With the help of the dense spiritual energy, it had quickly cultivated and grew into the unparalleled beast Lord Kirin. The demon beasts in the Hengduan mountain range did not like to stay in the demonic beast imperial court. It was not because it was a bad place, but because the incubus cultivated there. In terms of absorbing spiritual energy, no demon beast could compete with the incubus. Even if it could, it did not have the courage. Thus, other places were more suitable for demon beasts to cultivate. Chapter 561. Of course, the current spiritual energy density in Lin Yuan's lair was only comparable to that of the monster beast palace. However, in time, this spirit-gathering array, which used the green leaf water lotus as the core of the array, would definitely turn this area into the kind of immortal realm where spiritual energy liquefied. The green leaf water lotus was not a plant that grew on land. Ordinary underwater mud did not have the qualifications for the green leaf water lotus to grow. The water region where this kind of saint-grade rare flower lived was not water, but liquid Ling Qi. Lin Yuan didn't know how rich the spiritual energy had to be to cause the change in its form, but after thinking about it a little, he was afraid that only the heavenly court and other places where immortals and gods gathered described in those myths would have such a phenomenon. Thinking of this point, Lin Yuan's eyes slowly flashed with a trace of coldness. This was indeed his lair, but he had not lived in it for several months already. The aura that belonged to him had also faded to the extreme. If it was a demon beast with intelligence, it might have some misgivings about this being his territory and retreated. But those low-level demon beasts that had not even reached the level of an ordinary adult would not know a fart. Sniffing twice, Lin Yuan quickly smelled 2 or 3 fishy smells near his lair. This discovery made him frown slightly. Although he did not have any mental mysophobia, he did not like others to touch his things without his permission. Not to mention, these low-level demon beasts' brains were not too good. If they just wanted to borrow the dense Ling Qi to cultivate, it would be fine. But he was afraid that they would do everything they could to mess around in Lin Yuan's lair, affecting the growth of the green leaf water lotus, or even eating the seed. If a low-level demon beast ate the seed of a saint-grade rare flower, what would happen? If it was the Lin Yuan of the past, he would think that this demon beast's cultivation would improve greatly, and even become a genius among the demon beasts. But now, Lin Yuan could only sneer, because the treatment of the main character in novels would never appear in reality. The huge amount of energy entering the body had nothing to do with luck, cultivation method, or even physique. If he couldn't digest this energy as soon as possible, there would only be one result: he would explode. Although it was impossible for low-level Yao beasts to digest the seed of the green leaf water lotus, Lin Yuan was still worried that once the seed left its rooting state, it would drift with the wind to other areas. In that case, Lin Yuan had no way to guarantee that he would be able to take back this seed. Gee! Just as Lin Yuan was thinking and approaching the nest, a clear chirp suddenly sounded above his head. Lin Yuan raised his head slightly and saw an orange-red bird-type demonic beast that was about 30 meters tall. It flapped its wings and hovered in the air, looking at Lin Yuan with a vigilant gaze. In its beak, which seemed incomparably terrifying to humans, there was something that Lin Yuan was very familiar with. Cold stone grass. Lin Yuan's eyes suddenly turned cold. So there really was a thief who dared to enter his nest to steal something. He still remembered how miserably he had been chased when he had just arrived in this world for this spirit item that could raise anyone below the 10th level of the spirit awakening realm by 1 level. Even though his cultivation had rapidly advanced, he hadn't used this spirit item that he had obtained with great difficulty. Instead, it had been placed in Lin Yuan's nest as a souvenir. But now, this bird-type demonic beast was actually holding the cold stone grass in its beak and was even planning to return to Lin Yuan's nest. The scene in front of him made Lin Yuan inexplicably irritated. In his previous life, there was technology. In this life, there were cultivators. However, no matter which world it was, the power of nature was always the strongest. Just like in the legends of his previous life, cultivators had to pass through thunder tribulation to become immortals. Ordinary landslides and tsunamis could take away countless lives. Even if a cultivator was strong enough to resist any natural disaster, time was something that they could never defeat. However, under the powerful, violent, and ruthless surface of nature, there was actually a gentle side. All kinds of natural disasters had signs that they were about to happen. Animals could instinctively sense it, and humans could calculate it with various instruments. As long as one understood this rule and followed the rules of nature, no matter how powerful the natural disaster was, it wouldn't take one's life. The weak were prey to the strong. This was the law of the jungle, and it was also one of the rules of nature. In the cruel natural environment, everyone was a predator. The strong predator devoured the weak predator, while the weak predator avoided the strong predator while preying on the weaker predator. This was the rule of nature. Many wild beasts like to patrol their own territory and scatter their excrement around their territory. This wasn't barbarism, but a top predator declaring its existence, telling those outsiders that this territory belonged to it. Although Lin Yuan wasn't so vile as to scatter his excrement around his nest, he had lived here for quite a long time. His aura had already spread far and wide with the wind. Those low-level demonic beasts and top-level wild beasts in the neighboring areas should all know that the master of this territory was an existence that they couldn't afford to provoke. Moreover, Lin Yuan's nest still had a large amount of snake slough left behind. It was just that his realm and cultivation of the Golden Body's secret art were not enough at that time, so these snake scales didn't have the qualifications to be made into armor for the Blackwater army. Piling up in the nest, they could still intimidate the existence that insulted Lin Yuan's nest. However, what was wrong with this bird-type demonic beast? It was completely ignoring his authority. Going in and out of his nest was like returning home. Even when it saw Lin Yuan's true body, this bird-type demonic beast didn't show the slightest bit of fear. Instead, it let out an incomparably arrogant cry to remind Lin Yuan of its existence. It was as if it wasn't occupying Lin Yuan's nest, but rather Lin Yuan was invading its nest. Something's wrong, Lin Yuan softly muttered, his gaze sweeping over the bird-type demonic beast. Logically speaking, normal demonic beasts wouldn't have the courage to open their mouths and provoke him. Even wisdom demonic beasts would only have the qualifications to tremble in front of Lin Yuan. After all, other than the powerful aura of a mountain lord, Lin Yuan's dragon might couldn't be ignored. Could this orange-red bird demonic beast have some incredible background? With a cultivation around the 6th level of the Spirit Awakening realm, if he maintained this distance, even if the Dragon King accidentally leaked his aura, he would still be able to intimidate this bird demonic beast and even cause it to fall unconscious. A demonic beast that challenged the authority of nature and even thought that it should be like this? Something's wrong. Something's very wrong. What are you? Lin Yuan didn't hesitate. He directly activated All Things Have Spirit and began to communicate with the bird. Chapter 562. You're the thing, idiot. The bird demon flapped its wings, and its black eyes flashed, as if 2 balls of flames were rising in its eyes. At this moment, the bird demon's aura changed. Although it was still at the 6th level of the Spirit Awakening realm, from a certain perspective, this bird demon's aura was actually on par with Lin Yuan's. Even Lin Yuan's dragon's might was suppressed by a lot. A 6th level Spirit Awakening realm demonic beast was on par with a 1st level Mountain Lord demonic beast in terms of aura. If this matter was told to others, no one would believe it. If that 1st level Mountain Lord demonic beast was Lin Yuan, who had been in the limelight recently, others would think that even if it was a story, it couldn't be so ridiculous, right? But the truth was that this strange scene was indeed happening in front of Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan looked at the bird demon with a complicated expression in his heterochromatic vertical pupils, but there was more pity in his eyes. He sneered, "It seems that the hatred of my previous life has helped me. At least I have learned to be in awe of the existence that is stronger than me before I have enough strength. But before you came to this world, you didn't seem to have been beaten by society." As his voice fell, the bird demon's eyes suddenly flashed with fear. In the next moment, without waiting for the bird demon to speak, a powerful force erupted and firmly squeezed its body. The threat of death awakened it from its shock, and it wanted to flap its wings desperately to struggle. However, in the next moment, the lake water wrapped in Lin Yuan's demonic power tightened again, squeezing the bird demon directly into a pile of meat paste. A white light swept out from the meat paste and rushed toward the deeper parts of the monster beast forest at an extremely fast speed. However, the speed of the white light was very fast, but in front of the current Lin Yuan, it was still as slow as a funny scene in a slow-motion movie. With a flash of his figure, Lin Yuan, who was in the lake, rose into the air. A large amount of lake water slid down the black flood dragon's body, smashing the surrounding grass until it bent down. He was like an insufferably arrogant king, making people not dare to look directly at him. Lin Yuan's mouth opened slightly, and a trace of black viscous liquid flowed out from the corner of his mouth. In one breath, the liquid turned into a black arrow, accurately hitting the white light that was trying to escape. Then, there was a series of shaw gnawing sounds. In about 4 or 5 breaths, the black liquid slowly swelled, and then condensed into a sparrow-sized bird. "Tell me, where did you come from?" Lin Yuan looked at the black bird in front of him with a mocking gaze and asked. Replying to the Lord of the Underworld, "I came from Earth. I don't know how I came to this world, but when I woke up, I found that I had become a bird." Then, there was an existence in my consciousness that called itself the system that told me that it would help me evolve into the most powerful creature in the universe. I was very excited at the time, thinking that the protagonist's treatment in those novels had happened to me. After that, for about 2 months, I followed the system's guidance and found this place to nest. At first, I was very resistant, because my instincts told me that this place belonged to a very powerful predator, and if I stayed here, it was very likely that I would die. But the system told me that if I didn't nest here, it would remove the binding with me, and let me live in this world full of demonic beasts and cultivators as an ordinary bird. After living here for about 2 months, the predator that brought me fear in the beginning didn't come back to this nest at all, and I began to slowly adapt to life here. The spiritual energy in other places was not as rich as here, and I could only gain 1 or 2 attribute points from hunting in those places, or even nothing, and it was not as fast as cultivating here. And after such a long time, that powerful predator didn't come back, so I thought that it had died in the mouth of other beasts, and lived here with peace of mind. Until just now, when I felt your aura, I subconsciously wanted to escape, but the system gave me a strange mission. It asked me to go to that cave and take out an unknown herb, and then took the initiative to provoke you. I thought that the system wouldn't let the protagonist die, so I had the courage to provoke the Lord of the Underworld. The black bird spoke very slowly, as if it was afraid that Lin Yuan couldn't hear it clearly if it spoke too quickly. The talent of the underworld's black water was very terrifying. Regardless of strength, bloodline, or anything else, as long as one entered the underworld's black water, they would become an undead that couldn't be killed. Only the master of the underworld's black water had the right to destroy these undead existences. There was also some related knowledge that one would naturally know after becoming an undead in the underworld's black water. There was no possibility of resisting Lin Yuan, and even the most unyielding undead had to unconditionally obey Lin Yuan's every order. Lin Yuan nodded slightly, and with a thought, the black bird in front of him exploded into a pool of black liquid, and returned to Lin Yuan's body. The system was suspected to be the existence of the heavenly Tao. Its target might be Hongjun, or it might be the human king who had mastered the power of science and technology in the world of his previous life. It might even be both. It might want to create a world similar to the one before Hongjun stole the heavenly Tao. And no matter if its opponent was Hongjun or the human king, they were not existences that could be easily resisted. Therefore, the heavenly Tao would not choose to put all its eggs in one basket. At that time, in the countless worlds separated from the chaos, there were countless hosts selected by the system. For example, the bloodline transaction that Lin Yuan had conducted before might have been a transaction with other system hosts. The appearance of another host selected by the system was not enough to surprise Lin Yuan. However, in the original conception of the system, it was impossible for these hosts to meet before they had enough strength. Moreover, a world might not be able to support a single host. Placing multiple hosts in a single world was undoubtedly a waste of resources. This bird demon host that should not have appeared was obviously a warning from the system to Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan did not follow the system's plan and walk on the path of the gods worshipped with the power of incense. He did not even listen to the system's advice and began to use the underworld's black water, which was listed as a serious threat, to absorb the sky demon to strengthen his own strength. However, the system did not have any means to punish Lin Yuan, and could only waste its power and time to create this bird demon host to warn Lin Yuan that Lin Yuan was not its only choice, and that it had better be obedient and so on. Whoever believed such words would be a fool. Lin Yuan grinned, and a look of ridicule flashed across his heterochromatic vertical pupils. The system was very strong, and suspected to be the existence of the heavenly Tao. It could easily crush him with a burst of power. However, for a host like him, the system did not need to be too afraid. Chapter 563. What was the system? It was the heavenly Tao. What was the heavenly Tao? It was the rules. Even if the rules had their own will, it was still an unchangeable rule. Just like Lin Yuan, even if he had a human soul, he was still a black Jiao. It did not mean that he could be a human just because he felt that he was a human. Similarly, an existence that was a rule naturally could not go against the rules. As a system, it could not issue any task to Lin Yuan that could not be completed with Lin Yuan's current ability. Even if the task of provoking Lin Yuan, such as the bird-type demonic beast, seemed to be a death sentence, the punishment could not be too high. Whether it used a gentle method or directly refused to carry out the task, the host must be able to bear the price. On the other hand, the bird-type monster's mission in Lin Yuan's nest was not very difficult because Lin Yuan was not in the monster forest at that time, and even Bada was transferred to the northern frontier to participate in the battle. It could even be said that it was a mission that gave rewards. The punishment for failing this mission could be set very high. For example, the system could unbind the host, erase the host, and so on. At the beginning of the mission to fight the mutated blood spirit, the system gave out rewards and punishments, but when the difficulty of the mission exceeded the scope, the system quickly changed the requirements of the mission. This was a typical example of following the rules. The system could not let Lin Yuan die for no reason, so Lin Yuan had to maintain respect for the system, not fear. Of course, the system could also spend a large price to cultivate another host in this world, and provide more resources to let him grow faster. This was the meaning that the system wanted to express to Lin Yuan when the bird-type monster appeared in front of Lin Yuan. It did not make meaningless verbal threats, but put one thing into practice. It was like a person threatening you over the phone, and a person threatening you with a knife at your waist. It was a different feeling. Actually, even if you nurture a new host, it won't be a threat to me. No matter where you hide it, I can easily find it. I'm very clear that the reason why that bird and I became demonic beasts was not because you wanted us to become demonic beasts, but because you only have the ability to make us demonic beasts. Otherwise, you wouldn't have chosen to start with demonic beasts in the Sky Martial continent. Since that's the case, your new host will either be in the Hingduan mountain range or the Endless Sea domain. Furthermore, with me in front, your new host won't have much room to show off. It won't be able to reach my level. Even if it can, the other forces won't allow an existence like me to rise. Besides, there's still me. Will I watch it develop without doing anything? After thinking through his thoughts, Lin Yuan felt less fear in his heart, and even his tone had a hint of a smile. The system was still playing dead, as if everything that happened before had nothing to do with it. After a long while, Lin Yuan was still standing in the same place, and his heterochromatic vertical pupils revealed a playful brilliance. What do you want? The system's words slowly appeared in Lin Yuan's mind. The smile in Lin Yuan's eyes deepened, and he said indifferently, I don't want to be your puppet, but it doesn't mean that I don't want to cooperate with you. You need a strong person to kill Hong Jun for you, and I also need your strength to grow quickly. There is no conflict between us, is there? The system was silent for a moment. Tell me. The system typed another line of words. Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly, and he said coldly, don't try to trip me up, and don't think of leading me down that path. Those people on the investiture of the gods, what happened to them hundreds and thousands of years later, I can still remember it clearly. The system did not remain silent this time, but it stood up like a cat whose tail was stepped on. Lin Yuan even felt his entire sea of consciousness shake, and a wave of dizziness hit him like a tide. After about 5 or 6 breaths, the system finally finished venting, and slowly typed a line of words. It's not rare to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs, but you should also know that this kind of thing can only be done after the goal is achieved. What do you think the price I paid for cultivating the gods on the investiture of the gods for thousands of years? Then, do you think that just letting the primordial world fragment that I live in leave the primordial world's main body is comparable to the price I paid to create a god role, nurture the power of a human immortal, and fight against Hongjun? Lin Yuan, for a moment, he could not find a reason to refute, but he could only remain silent. But to be honest, there were many famous people on the investiture of the gods, and the price to cultivate such a huge force was much more terrifying than cultivating Lin Yuan to his current level. At least, Lin Yuan was not confident that he could take a blow from those people who were at the bottom of the investiture of the gods at this moment. Such a huge price only allowed him to temporarily escape from Hongjuan's evil clutches, and then abandon him. This obviously did not make sense. If the power of incense was really as Lin Yuan had expected, and it was something that the heavenly axiom controlled those gods, then these gods should be absolutely loyal to the heavenly axiom, so why were they wiped out by the heavenly axiom, and all of them were wiped out? It's the will of the human king. These 5 simple words made Lin Yuan vaguely see the heavenly axiom gnashing its teeth. Although the human king Di Axian was destroyed by Hongjun and I, his will was still passed down. Who do you think said things like, "The heavenly axiom is heartless, and treats all things as straw dogs," and, "If the saints don't die, there will be more thieves"? These words lack some boldness, and even if they are at the tip of the tongue, can they be said casually? The corner of Lin Yuan's mouth rose slightly, and he said in a deep voice, "Very good, everyone has their own plans. You want to eliminate the human king and Hongjun, and create a new world that is ruled by the heavenly axiom, without saints. Hongjun wants to completely control the heavenly axiom, and make himself the ruler of the world. The human king is more straightforward. He wants to exclude the existence of you and Hongjun, and create a world without legends. Then what about you? What do you want?" The system did not deny Lin Yuan's words, but slowly tapped out its doubts. Lin Yuan opened his bloody mouth, tilted his head and asked, "What do I want? Could it be that you didn't hear what that bird demon called me? Lord of the underworld. Heaven, earth, and man. This was the foundation of a perfect world that could not be changed, or it could be said that the heavens and earth were on the side of the world. They were not made up of the same world, but had forcefully integrated themselves into another world. For example, the Tianwu continent did not have the heavenly court, nor did it have the underworld. It could not be considered a complete world, and this world lacked the existence of immortals, gods, ghosts, and monsters. Lin Yuan's appearance could be a way for the world to complete itself. Chapter 564. How arrogant. The system still used words to express itself, but Lin Yuan could clearly feel its disdain. In fact, if it were Lin Yuan himself, if he did not have the dark water talent, he would not believe that he could become the Lord of the Underworld. After all, the Lord of the Underworld did not only refer to the members of the Underworld system. In the Underworld, there was no Underworld that belonged to them. If the souls captured by their subordinates did not have a world where they could reincarnate, they would never be considered as the Lord of the Underworld. Even if they reached the level of the black and white impermanence, they would only be high-level workers. They were far from being considered as lords. In the midst of the past, the status of the underworld did not seem to be high. It was as if when one reached the level of Sun Wukong, one could casually treat the underworld as nothing. But in fact, that was not the case. When the power of the underworld erupted, it was much more terrifying than the heavenly court and spirited mountain. It was just that the underworld had never liked to show its power. It could also be said that there were too many forces that wanted to reach out to the underworld. Everyone was just confronting each other. No one could think of turning the underworld into their own power. Everyone had their own responsibilities and territories. Back then, when Sun Wukong wreaked havoc in the underworld and tampered with the Book of Life and Death, it sounded very powerful to ordinary people. But in fact, it was just that. The people that Sun Wukong fought in the underworld were basically workers. The monkey did not encounter any of the truly powerful existences. Moreover, the monkey did not change many of the Book of Life and Death. Even the monkey descendants of Mount Huagua and Mount Huagua did not have any bad influence on the monkey's world. Moreover, the underworld included so many worlds. Making a big fuss over such a small matter would only benefit others. That was why the monkey was safe and sound. However, the funny thing was that the Book of Life and Death was not a treasure that could defy the heavens and change one's fate. It was just a roster that recorded when and who should die, how long they had lived and how long they should live, and so on. Even if this kind of thing was torn 100 times, it was just something that could be rewritten. It was not as ridiculous as what Sherman had boasted about when he wanted to bring the monkey up to the stage. After changing the Book of Life and Death, other than the monkey himself, who could be considered as a powerful demon king, who became the victorious fighting Buddha and was received by Buddhism, there was no other powerful monkey demon in the Flower Fruit Mountain. If the underworld wants you dead, then you must die. Unless you can force the entire underworld to bow their heads, otherwise, even if you tear the underworld's Book of Life and Death into shreds, those damned fellows will still be taken away by the underworld's workers when the time comes. Don't want to go to the underworld? That works too. Destroy yourself. Apart from having one's soul scattered and having one's body and soul destroyed, nothing could escape the fate of going to hell. What a person reincarnated into was decided by the underworld. Even the reincarnation of an immortal, the time of reincarnation, and what identity they would have after reincarnation were all under the jurisdiction of the underworld. Although the speed at which immortals could cultivate again was not slow, if someone were to deliberately prevent them from cultivating, they would end up with their immortal spirit dispersing after one lifetime. In the next reincarnation, they would be immortal through and through. Therefore, it was not that the cake of the underworld was not delicious, but that this cake was too delicious, so everyone wanted to have a bite. Gods, immortals, shamans, and demons all had their own forces in the underworld. Even Buddhism, who came later, had a bodhisattva who made a great vow and swore that he would not become a Buddha until hell was empty. After that, he firmly occupied a place in the underworld. Other than these abnormally powerful existences since the beginning of time, don't think that humans have no influence in the underworld. On the contrary, the influence of humans in the underworld was simply terrifying. Zhang Bairen had to go through hundreds of millions of tribulations to become the celestial emperor, and all the gods in the world who violated the heavenly law would be struck down to the mortal world to become beasts or humans who had to undergo tribulation to cultivate again. Only after completing their merit could they return to the heavenly court to become immortals. Just by looking at Zhang Bairen's actions, one could see that his influence in the underworld was probably so great that it made one's hair stand on end. Even if other forces did not pay a certain price, they would not be able to interfere with these reincarnated immortals. It was not difficult for Lin Yuan to become the lord of the underworld in this incomplete world, but the difficult part was that once the underworld appeared in this world, the underworld of this world would be connected to the main body of the underworld. Although in Lin Yuan's territory, no matter who it was, they would not be able to interfere with the operation of this world without Lin Yuan's consent, but those famous big shots who had been famous for a long time would not allow a young lord of the underworld to appear. Lin Yuan might even die without knowing why. Since Pan Gu opened the sky, how much time had passed in the world's evolution? Even the heavenly axiom itself did not know. However, one thing was certain, the division of power in the underworld had always been very clear. Other than the two supreme positions of the great sacred emperor equaling heavens and the great emperor of the Bayin necropolis, the ghost emperors of the 5 directions, the 6 heavenly guardians of the Rahu tribe, the 10 kings of hell, and the remnants of the liches from ancient times were the only ones who had made great vows. The other forces could not interfere with the affairs of the underworld at all. Even Hong Jun could not do anything about it. Unless he was willing to take a huge risk and enter the underworld personally, then directly flatten these old forces, no matter who he sent, they would be killed by the combined forces of many forces. However, the heavenly axiom still had its own will. If Hong Jun dared to slack off, the heavenly axiom's counterattack was not something that a mere saint like him could withstand. With Lin Yuan's personality, even if he brought the underworld into the underworld, it would not infringe on the interests of the other forces. At most, they would not touch Lin Yuan. However, as the system who had watched Lin Yuan walk step by step until today, it knew very well that Lin Yuan was not the kind of person who would be willing to confront others for thousands of years. As long as he accumulated enough power, he would definitely stir up chaos in the underworld. Let's not talk about how the underworld would fall into chaos and all the other worlds would fall into chaos or something like that. To be honest, the heavenly axiom felt that the current situation in the underworld was quite good. Although it could not reach into the underworld, at least that fellow Hong Jun could not reach into the underworld either. It's not that big of a claim, because I do have the confidence to do so. Lin Yuan coiled his flood dragon body together and sneered. Apart from the great god Pan Gu, no one else has the ability to create a new world. Everything in the underworld has formed its own system. It's just that a group of powerful existences have occupied the underworld and called themselves the underworld gods. In reality, their biggest role is to maintain the stability of the underworld, guide souls into the underworld, and capture ghosts who have fled to other worlds. The rest of the matters can be done by the operation of the underworld itself. At this point, Lin Yuan changed the topic. Like an unsheathed sharp sword, he growled, "But, I am the Styx." Chapter 565. The war in the north had been going on for such a long time, and they had even annexed some of the sky demon's spiritual bodies. Now, Lin Yuan's Netherrealm Blackwater talent had made considerable progress. If he released all of it, although it could not compare to the endless Netherworld River, it could at least fill up a pond that was more than 10 meters high. In time, it would not be a problem to merge into the Netherworld River, or even replace it. The Netherworld River was indeed vast, but it had never had a clear master. Even the famous Mengpo only took water from the Netherworld River to boil soup. As for the so-called ferrymen of the Netherworld River, they were just people whose evil karma had not been eliminated. They knew that they could not beat the Bridge of Helplessness, so they could only ferry their souls to the other side according to the will of the underworld to accumulate achievements for themselves and fight for a chance to be reincarnated. These ferrymen of the Netherworld River might not even be able to protect the passengers on their ships, let alone the master of the Netherworld River. Compared to those who called themselves the gods of the underworld, Lin Yuan, who was qualified to control the Netherworld River, was indeed more qualified to be the master of the underworld. After all, those who struggled in the endless river of the underworld were evil spirits from all over the universe. They, whose evil karma had not been eliminated, were not existences that the Bridge of Helplessness could bear. Therefore, when they crossed the Bridge of Helplessness, they fell into the endless Netherworld River one after another. In a long time that was almost endless, they gradually became distorted and crazy. They did everything they could to trick the souls that had just entered the underworld into the Netherworld River to suffer together with them. The only one who could give them relief was the master of the Netherworld River, who should have existed but had never appeared. Those crazy souls from all over the universe were willing to give up everything for the simple word, relief. Regardless of whether Lin Yuan's punishment for them was to be reincarnated or their souls destroyed, as long as they were not allowed to continue soaking in the Netherworld River for eternity, they were even willing to show madness and evil to the fullest for any of Lin Yuan's thoughts. Then, happy cooperation. Happy cooperation. The two of them quickly reached a consensus. The heavenly axiom was actually not that easy to talk to. But then again, Lin Yuan was indeed the most outstanding host it had cultivated so far. Unfortunately, Lin Yuan was not satisfied with being its puppet. But rather than wasting a lot of resources and time to fight with Lin Yuan, it was better to let the two of them become true partners, as Lin Yuan had said. As for whether or not both sides could get along peacefully after achieving their goals, that would depend on everyone's means. No one could guarantee that Lin Yuan wouldn't want to become the second Hong Jun. No one could guarantee that it would be able to escape from Hong Jun's hands again if they were to do it again. However, the world of adults had always been so cruel. As long as they could reach an agreement on benefits, any conflict could be temporarily put aside. In any case, based on the current situation, Lin Yuan wasn't a threat to it yet. Ding! Congratulations, host, you have successfully unlocked the incense stick template function, sacrifice. Subfunction name, sacrifice, effect, your believers can offer you offerings, and the offerings will be converted into incense power according to their value. Note 1, this method doesn't require the sacrificer to be your believer, but if you accept offerings from non-believers, the incense power you receive will be reduced by 20%. Note 2, sacrifice isn't worship. As a god, you have to give something in return, and must give the sacrificer something of corresponding value. Damn, I'm AF * king expert. Lin Yuan took a deep breath. The devout worship of Lin Yuan by believers was a spontaneous act. Lin Yuan didn't have to pay any price, and Lin Yuan could generate incense power every day for the incense stick template's various subfunctions. It was precisely because devout believers could only generate incense power that the various Blackwater Dragon King temples in the northern frontier didn't provide Lin Yuan with a single bit of incense power. However, this sacrificial model was much simpler and more crude. Although the believers provided more incense power, the existence of non-believers could still provide incense power to Lin Yuan. It was just that the nature of the offering had changed. From a believer's sincere love for a god, it was downgraded to a mutually beneficial transaction between both sides. In ancient times, the human race was weak. The various tribes worshipped the exotic beasts of the mountains and seas as totems. They offered sacrifices to the exotic beasts regularly, and the tribesmen themselves would obtain certain benefits. For example, when they sacrificed a bear to pray for strength, the sacrificer would obtain the strength of at least one tiger. When you face a sacrificer who craves power, you can deduct the incense power and give it back in the form of attribute points. As long as the value is sufficient, this expenditure can be replaced with other things. Those who crave power can give back gold, silver, and treasures. Because gods are gods after all, you only need to give back. You don't have to do things according to the believer's wishes perfectly. At the same time, you can choose to give more back to the sacrificer, but it can't go below the bottom line. That's the rule. This is the path of the ancient gods. Lin Yuan silently calculated for a moment. Even if it wasn't the primeval times where exotic beasts ran rampant, but the world of his previous life, a bear's strength was 1.6 tons, and a tiger's strength was 0.5 tons. In other words, he would have to give back at least 1/3 of the incense power that the sacrificer provided him. It didn't sound as good as purely relying on the believer's power of faith, but the latter was huge. What's more, even gods had to learn to show their divinity in front of people to accumulate believers. Only then could they lie down and eat the believer's power of faith. Take the Western Cross sect for example. In his early years, he was squeezed out of the Greek divine system to the point where he almost couldn't survive. Even his son was nailed to a cross by mortals. Later, he still became one of the top gods. And the most interesting thing was that so many devout believers prayed every day, but he rarely responded. Instead, he let his believers think. If the god didn't respond, it wasn't the god's problem, but their own problem. Their faith wasn't devout enough. If one were to talk about how to be a good god, this should be a textbook existence. Unfortunately, Lin Yuan didn't intend to go down the path of completely relying on believers to obtain the power of incense. After all, the gods that had died in China for thousands of years had proven that this path was a dead end. It was better to learn the path of the ancient gods and simply trade with mortals to get what he needed. Although those totems had also died, it wasn't because they died, but because they were destroyed by other terrifying existences. As long as one was strong enough, the path of the ancient gods wouldn't bring about destruction. Moreover, gods that didn't rely on the power of incense to live wouldn't die even if they lost a single believer. Chapter 566. The sun gradually touched the horizon. The sky gradually darkened. More and more predators began to awaken. Even in the quiet demonic beast forest, from time to time, there would be terrifying bird-type demonic beasts flying across the sky, grabbing one or two beasts that were constantly struggling and howling. After flying to a certain height, these bird-type demonic beasts would loosen their claws and throw their prey down to the ground, smashing them into a pile of meat paste. Then, without any reluctance, they would flap their wings and look for their next prey. In this area where demonic beasts and wild beasts were densely packed, killing was never just because of hunger. Enjoying the pleasure of killing and showing off their strength were things that these low-level demonic beasts would never tire of doing. In front of a bonfire with smoke rising in spirals, 6 blood-stained white-robed youths silently looked at each other. After about 6 or 7 minutes, a large piece of meat roasted over the bonfire began to exude oil. The meat also began to show a golden color and the fragrance began to spread in all directions. However, the 6 of them were not worried that their actions would attract the demonic beast tide. The demonic beast forest was not the Hengduan Mountains. Even if there were demonic beasts, they would not be very strong. Demonic beasts at the 4th or 5th level of the Spirit Awakening realm would be able to occupy a large territory here. Demonic beasts at this level were not much different from normal wild beasts. They were also afraid of things like thunder and fire, so by lighting a bonfire at night, they could avoid unnecessary trouble. With the light of the fire, they would not be ambushed by demonic beasts in the dark environment. As for the fragrance of the roasted meat, it would not attract demonic beasts. After all, what stimulated demonic beasts was the sweet smell of blood in the air. Even if the demonic beasts smelled the smell of roasted meat, they would not be interested. The northern frontier seems to have found something. Recently, they have been increasing the lockdown of the demonic beast forest. A white-robed person used a dagger to cut off a piece of meat and said with a calm expression, "I heard that Su Chang had 2 batches of goods that were detained." Also, he reported back to the higher-ups that there seemed to be demonic beasts roaming around the camp. It feels like he has been targeted. Another white-robed person laughed and narrowed his eyes as he said, "Big brother Yao Fong, you believe this kind of thing?" In my opinion, Su Chang made up an excuse because he lost 2 batches of goods and was afraid that the higher-ups would be unhappy. Although the Black Jiao was powerful, he didn't have much influence. Only the beast kings in the Hengduan mountain range would give him some face. In a place like the demonic beast forest, which was a no-man's land, wouldn't those low-level demonic beasts run away the moment they saw the Black Jiao? Who can it command? Yao Fong was silent for a moment. He tore off a piece of meat and chewed on it. He said vaguely, "No matter what, it's better to be careful. That Black Jiao has gotten to where he is today step by step. No matter how you look at it, he's someone who plans before acting. It's too risky for us to cause trouble in his territory. There are some things that you would rather believe than not. The consequences of being careless are not worse than mine. You should be clear about that." Yao Fong's words caused the other 5 white-robed men to fall into silence. Even the white-robed man who spoke at the beginning revealed a faint trace of fear on his face. The Sky Demon looked powerful, but that was only because the cultivators of the Sky Martial Continent couldn't kill him. At most, they could find a place to seal him. However, this didn't mean that they didn't fear death. That Black Jiao had used some unknown method to block the boat at Wei River. It was unknown what method it used, but it was actually able to make a group of sky demon turn against the inferior race. Even the shackles and respect that existed in their bloodline had disappeared. Even the first generation had been forced to flee in a sorry state. What was even more terrifying was that those sky demon that Lin Yuan had killed didn't need any form of vessel. They could directly appear in front of the world with their physical bodies. Moreover, they couldn't be killed no matter what. Even if they felt disdain in their hearts, no one dared to ignore the warning from the higher-ups. That Black Jiao had indeed grasped some kind of special method. It had the ability to eliminate the sky demon. If it wasn't for the fear of being eliminated by Lin Yuan, how could they be willing to hide in the monster beast forest and cause a ruckus? Hiss hiss hiss, hiss hiss hiss, a strange sound suddenly sounded. Yao Fong seemed to have thrown away the beast meat in his hands the moment he heard the sound. He pulled out the sword at his waist, his face full of vigilance as he looked towards the dark area that couldn't be illuminated by the flames. Big brother Yao Fong, it's just a small disturbance. There's no need to be so exaggerated, right? The white-robed man who spoke earlier laughed. However, his right hand slowly pressed against the hilt of the sword at his waist. Although the other four didn't move, they also covered their weapons with their hands. At the same time, they pricked up their ears to listen to the surrounding movements. Yao Fong didn't say anything. Instead, his expression became more and more serious. He was a sky demon that had lived for tens of thousands of years. Although his bloodline and strength couldn't be compared to the first-generation sky demon, he had honed an ability that others envied through countless battles: intuition. Yao Fong could clearly feel the malice around him. However, in tens of thousands of years, Yao Fong had never felt such terrifying malice. He could even feel the muscles of his skin trembling. He could also feel the hair all over his body standing up. It was as if there was something extremely terrifying watching him in the darkness. Yao Fong closed his eyes slightly. After a moment, when he opened his eyes again, a red light flashed in his eyes. The world in front of him was a deathly black and white color. Ha! With a bitter laugh, Yao Fong threw down the sword in his hand and muttered helplessly, "It's over." This was a secret technique that he had painstakingly trained based on his intuition. He called it the Eye of Life and Death. In tens of thousands of years, Yao Fong had faced countless terrifying opponents. However, there had never been a time when he had opened the Eye of Life and Death to see the entire world in black and white. Black and white represented death. Only a place with color was the path to life. Yao Fong didn't even know who his opponent was, but he had already sensed that there was no way for them to survive. This suffocating feeling of despair was like a huge rock pressing down on his chest. Yao Fong even felt that he couldn't breathe. "Friend over there, since the preparations have been completed, why don't you show yourself?" Yao Fong's voice was filled with bitterness. In the face of despair, Yao Fong didn't even have the thought of struggling. Hey, big brother Yao Fong, don't joke around." The sky demon that had spoken earlier stood up and said with a serious expression, "We are sky demons. At most, we'll just give up this skin. How can we not even see our opponent and you? Then why don't you try and see if you can run?" In the darkness, a mocking voice sounded. Chapter 567. Immediately after, two rays of light flashed in the darkness. One of the sky demon wiped the cold sweat off his forehead, but he clearly didn't want to wait for death like Yao Fong. The red light in his eyes flickered for a moment, and a black shadow with a shriveled face and sharp fangs quietly withdrew from the leather bag. After choosing a direction, his spiritual body rushed out. Whoosh! A sound of something breaking through the air followed closely behind. The 5 sky demons watched as their spiritual body, which was supposed to be formless, was hit by a black arrow from the forest. The next moment, he screamed and fell to the ground, constantly twisting and convulsing. After 2 to 3 breaths, a Heaven Dipper Realm Level 1 sky demon turned into a ball of black viscous liquid and disappeared into the forest, no longer showing any signs of life. The black droplet that was originally only 2 to 3 centimeters long slowly turned into a ball of black liquid the size of a baby's fist. A sky demon completely disappeared from their senses. Gulp. Yao Fang swallowed a mouthful of saliva with some difficulty and said with a bitter smile, "Is this in front of Lord Dragon King of the Northern Frontier?" There weren't many who could deal with a sky demon, and even fewer who could make a sky demon disappear. And to be able to make a sky demon disappear so quickly, there was only one such existence in the entire world. Of course, it wasn't that the cultivators of the Sky Martial Continent were unable to eliminate a sky demon, but the requirements were very strict. They had to be cultivators whose cultivation surpassed the sealed sky demon, and they had to be Taoist or Buddhist disciples. They had to chant the Dharma incantation scriptures that had been passed down since ancient times, and use the natural Great Tao or Buddhist chanting to slowly eliminate the sky demon's evil aura. Only after a long period of time could they grind a sky demon to death. The stronger a sky demon was, the harder it was to eliminate. Some cultivators might not even be able to convert a powerful sky demon full of evil aura even at the end of their lifespan. The cost of this method was too great, and the gains did not make up for the losses. For the Heavenly Gate Guardians, who were already short of manpower, this was a method that they knew was feasible but could not do it. Therefore, some of the sky demon who didn't have a strong evil aura would be sealed in Taoist temples and monasteries to be slowly converted. Those who had committed grave sins would be sent to various dangerous places by the sky demon guardians to be sealed in various places to prevent them from coming out and wreaking havoc in the world. However, as time passed, the seal gradually lost its effect. Furthermore, the sky demon was also rescuing those seniors. Thus, there were more and more disasters involving the sky demon. The guardians of the heavenly gates were also suffering. However, Lin Yuan was a complete anomaly. Although the Heavenly Dipper Realm Sky Demon was not impossible to destroy, according to the relatively gentle method of the Heavenly Gates Guardian, it would take at least 1,000 years to achieve results. However, it was different for Lin Yuan. Good fellow, he could make them disappear in just 2 or 3 breaths. To cultivate to the Heavenly Dipper realm, even a sky demon would need a few thousand years to do so. In this case, the rate at which Heavenly Dipper realm sky demon was produced might not be as fast as the rate at which Lin Yuan destroyed them. Since you know that I am not to be trifled with, why do you still want to provoke me? Aren't you all despicable? Lin Yuan slowly opened his eyes. His different-colored vertical pupils overflowed with cold light. His movements were so fast that they could not be seen clearly. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of the remaining 5 sky demon. Yao Fang was silent for a moment. Then, he cupped his hands towards Lin Yuan and said helplessly, "We are only following orders. Lord Dragon King, please be magnanimous and let us go. I can guarantee that my brothers and I will never set foot in Lord Dragon King's territory again for the rest of our lives. If I violate my oath, I will immediately be struck by lightning and my soul will be destroyed." Although the sky demon race was filled with hostility, they placed great importance on oaths. This was especially so for oaths that were made with their soul aura. Once they violated the oath, the curse would immediately come true. This was one of the restrictions of the sky demon race. Just like how powerful creatures had weaker reproductive abilities and had longer growth cycles, there was no such thing as a perfect species that had no weaknesses. However, Yao Fang's words were half true. He indeed did not have the guts to provoke an existence that had the means to destroy him. However, this did not mean that Yao Fong was afraid of Lin Yuan to the bone. He just did not want to confront this black Jiao directly. The Sky Martial Continent was so big. Wouldn't it be better for him to go to other places and harm those existences that did not have the means to destroy the Sky Demon? Hence, there was a hidden meaning in his words. After all, he did not say that he would not become enemies with Lin Yuan in the future. Pfft, Lin Yuan sneered. He tilted his head and asked, "Your words are interesting. First of all, you have to know that although this king and the Sky Demon race have some grudges, there is definitely no irreconcilable hatred between them. Under these conditions, this king still revealed that he has the ability to destroy your Sky Demon race. Do you think that this king is the kind of person who abhors evil and is selfless?" This, Yao Fong did not know how to respond. After all, no matter how he responded, it would sound like he was scolding this black Jiao. Furthermore, this black Jiao was the one who started it. But then again, it was fine for him to scold himself. If he scolded him, then it would be considered as forming a grudge. Under the eaves, Yao Fong had no choice but to lower his head. The bitter smile on his face deepened. He cupped his hands and said, "Although Lord Dragon King does not care about trifles, he also has the temperament of an ambitious person. If there is no benefit, Lord Dragon King will not say that he will not do things, but he will definitely not do things so decisively. Forgive me for being slow-witted, but I still do not know the meaning of Lord Dragon King's actions. Offending the Sky Demon race to the core, does it benefit Lord Dragon King? After all, they were a race that had reproduced for countless years. Coupled with their immortal and indestructible characteristics, even if the Sky Demon race had not produced a powerhouse at the level of the ancestral dragon or the primordial phoenix, it did not mean that the Sky Demon race was weak and could be bullied. Even if they were a group of pigs, there were still existences like Marshal Tianpeng who could support them. Lin Yuan had the ability to destroy the Sky Demon, and he was also destroying the Sky Demon. Such an action was indeed offending the Sky Demon to the core. If not for the Heavenly Gate Protector keeping a close watch, there would have already been powerhouses from the Sky Demon side personally coming to kill Lin Yuan. Phew, Lin Yuan gently exhaled. The Sky Demon that had just been swallowed slowly condensed beside him. He looked coldly at the other 5 Sky Demon. "Because you are the food that will make me stronger." Lin Yuan's lips curled up slightly, revealing a wanton smile. In the darkness, more and more Sky Demon controlled by the Nether Realm's black water appeared. They faintly surrounded the 5 normal Sky Demon. Yao Fong's thoughts flashed and he bitterly said, "If this is the case, Lord Dragon King will probably not even give us a chance to speak. Since you have appeared to meet us, you must have a request. Why don't you tell us? As long as it is something we can do, we will not spare any effort." Chapter 568. There's no point in catching small fries like you. Let's get straight to the point. Where is your palace master? Lin Yuan thought for a moment. Combining the memories he obtained from the underwater secret realm, he said in a low voice, "If I'm not wrong, that palace master should be an exceptional talent, right?" As soon as he said this, the expressions of the 5 Sky Demon changed. Although the existence of the Sky Demon was not a secret to the peak-level cultivators of the Sky Martial Continent, and there were even old rivals who had interacted with each other for countless years. However, the origin and system of the Sky Demon had always been a mystery. This was because no Sky Demon would have any association with these low-level creatures of flesh and blood. Unless the other party was like Lin Yuan, a creature who grasped the ability to destroy the Sky Demon, perhaps only then would the Sky Demon feel apprehension. In reality, the Sky Demon could not be considered a type of creature. They could only be considered derivatives, similar to the divine senses Lin Yuan had scattered across the various Blackwater Dragon King temple sculptures. At the beginning, they were the purest evil thoughts of a certain creature. Following the baptism of time, these evil thoughts gradually began to develop their own wills. However, they did not become the heart demons of that creature. Instead, they became the creature's family clan, an arm of support. Although in the future, the divine senses Lin Yuan had scattered out could also develop their own wills, this type of change was not purely due to the baptism of time. Even Lin Yuan might not be able to live for that long, let alone the divine senses he had scattered out. This was a change that would only occur after being influenced by the power of incense for a long time. This also meant that the sky demon race's ancestor was something even more powerful than God. It was just that he had never revealed any signs of his existence. He only endlessly created sky demons for them to achieve his goals. As for the birth of the first generation, only the old sky demon, who was over 10,000 years old, knew that their race was essentially a spiritual body. Only at special times would they have the qualifications to enter the blood pool of the ancestor and obtain a temporary physical body. Only then would they mate with each other and have a very small chance of giving birth to the first generation sky demon. Meanwhile, the first generations were not pure spiritual bodies. Their bodies were mixed with the blood of the progenitor, which was why the sky demon had submitted to the first generations, who might not even be as strong as himself. This was the respect that a derivative of the main body had for the main body's bloodline. However, this type of matter had always been the sky demon race's secret. Forget about the inferior races, even the younger, normal sky demons might not know about it. How did Lin Yuan, this black Jiao, know about the existence of the first generation? What? You don't want to talk? Lin Yuan tilted his head, a cold light flashing through his heterochromatic vertical pupils. Of course, he knew why these sky demons were so shocked. If it wasn't for the inherited memories in the secret underwater realm, he would also know about the special existence of the first generation. However, that was all he knew. How the first generation came to be was still an unsolved mystery. Even the inherited memories only mentioned the existence of the ancestor, but there was no evidence to prove that this line of thought was correct. It was only after Lin Yuan dissected an immortal medicine that he was able to verify part of the statement in the inherited memory. The elixir of immortality that the palace master brought with him was indeed a silver metal bowl. After crushing the metal ball, one could see a black liquid sealed by all kinds of incantations and formations. It looked similar to the nether realm black water, but the nether realm black water did not have its own will. Everything followed Lin Yuan's orders. However, that black liquid was extremely invasive and aggressive. It was like a hungry lion. The moment it was unsealed, it even tried to charge into Lin Yuan's body as if it wanted to control Lin Yuan. If it wasn't for the nether realm's black water, the black liquid might have succeeded. Strangely, when the liquid that looked like the nether realm black water touched the nether realm black water, it seemed to have met its natural enemy. It actually showed a human-like fear and subconsciously wanted to escape. However, under Lin Yuan's control, the nether realm black water was like a python that had caught its prey. It tightly wrapped around the black liquid and directly swallowed it. Originally, Lin Yuan's nether realm black water was about 600 to 700 cubic meters. On average, it was about 1 mu of land around him. After swallowing this black liquid, Lin Yuan's nether realm black water increased by at least 100 cubic meters. It was a great supplement. It was a pity that the palace master only had one immortality elixir with him. In other words, this was the immortality elixir that could really transform people into inferior demons. The immortality elixirs circulating in the northern region seemed to be on a large scale, but after Lin Yuan took them apart, he found that they were just elixirs refined from ordinary herbs. However, these herbs were soaked in the black liquid before they were refined into elixirs. A black soaking mark was left on the inside of the dregs, but the nether realm black water had no interest in it, and Lin Yuan could not feel any negative emotions. It should be that after being refined into medicinal pills, the black liquid lost its activity. However, to be able to make so many defective immortality medicines, it meant that the other had a large amount of black liquid. The black liquid was a great supplement to the nether realm black water. Lin Yuan, who could not obtain large amounts of sacrifices in a short time, could only use the nether realm black water to increase his power. Therefore, Lin Yuan had an extreme desire for this black liquid. The palace master must have used a large amount of the black liquid to make these defective immortality medicines. This not only threatened Lin Yuan's rule over the northern frontier, but it was also a waste of an excellent resource. Therefore, Lin Yuan boldly guessed that the black liquid here was a part of the Nether River. Was the ancestor a powerful person in the underworld? After all, the black liquid had enhanced the Nether Realm's black water, coupled with the existence of a special spiritual body like the heavenly demon. Lin Yuan was more and more certain about this idea. Although he didn't dare to say that he was 100% sure, he was at least 60% sure. Therefore, Lin Yuan was very interested in the ancestor. He even felt that the other party was a key person for him to control the Nether River. Although the Nether Realm Black Water controlled hundreds of Sky Demon, most of them were inferior races. The remaining ordinary Sky Demon were not weak, but they did not know much. After all, the ancestor had always been careful to hide himself. Even if there was a little risk, he would not send the Sky Demon that knew of his existence into the Sky Martial continent. Only those heavenly demons that had existed for a very long time and had not been captured by humans, or that the first generation of heavenly demons, could give Lin Yuan more information about the ancestor. Otherwise, after crossing the Divine Gate, there would be an endless void. No matter where he went, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack to find the ancestor, who was playing hide-and-seek with many big shots in the prehistoric era. Chapter 569. Moreover, if that ancestor was really like what he had expected and had cut off a branch of the endless river Styx for his own use, or if he was like Lin Yuan and had eaten some kind of strange substance that caused his body to change and gave birth to a divine ability similar to the Nether Realm's black water, then the other party's strength must be extremely terrifying. If he didn't have the confidence to find him, then it would be hard to say who would become whose tonic. Only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you win 100 battles. Lin Yuan wanted to know more about the ancestor, not because he suspected that the other party was the same kind and wanted to get closer to him. Only lambs would gather in groups. Ferocious beasts had always been solitary. Even if Lin Yuan had convinced himself countless times and confirmed his identity as a human, at his level of cultivation, there were endless possibilities in the future. It was already impossible for him to mix with ordinary humans. Even if he regained a human body one day, there was a high chance that he would find a mountain forest to live in seclusion and continue to climb to a higher realm. This was because his path of evolution was still different from ordinary humans. Therefore, after Lin Yuan confirmed the existence of the ancestor and some information, his only thought was to hunt and devour the other party. This was the law of beasts that belonged to nature. It had nothing to do with race, only power. As the saying went, a mountain cannot hold two tigers. With all these reasons added together, Lin Yuan wanted to find the palace master right now. Because in Lin Yuan's eyes, this fellow was not only an enemy, but also a walking treasure. Yao Fang's expression changed several times before he helplessly spread his hands and smiled. Sir Dragon King, since you know about the first generation, you should know that us ordinary Sky Demon must unconditionally obey the first generation's orders and cannot do anything to harm the first generation, right? It's not that I don't want to cooperate with you, but I might not even be able to finish my words before I disappear. The Sky Demon race had an almost endless lifespan. In other words, as long as the ancestor didn't die, they wouldn't die. However, the celestial devils were the spawn of evil thoughts. They were ferocious and aggressive by nature, but when faced with real threats, they were timid and cowardly. It could be said that they were the embodiment of their bad nature. Most of the celestial devils were ferocious when they were born, but as they grew older, their ferocity would be concealed and they would show others a tactful attitude. The longer a sky demon lived, the harder it was for them to die. This was something that didn't change in the universe. At least, they wouldn't give up the chance to live for a moment of bravery. Therefore, when facing Lin Yuan, who was a threat to them, Yao Fong was so calm. He didn't resist, but he didn't forget to show his desire to live. This method was very tactful because they were just workers and didn't have any enmity with Lin Yuan. Angering Lin Yuan wouldn't do them any good. On the contrary, if the conditions could be negotiated, they might have a chance to live. After a moment of silence, Yao Fong raised his eyebrows and smiled. Since the Dragon King has a way to control the sky demon race and is willing to lower himself to communicate with us, there must be something you want us to do, right? Hearing this, Lin Yuan was silent for a moment. He didn't know how trustworthy this sky demon's words were, but since the other was willing to speak, then he had a desire to live. Therefore, it was reasonable for him to say what he couldn't do from the start and tell Lin Yuan where his bottom line was. Also, even if these sky demon were controlled by the Nether Realm's black water, they couldn't do anything to harm the first generation or progenitor. Even if it was indirect, it wouldn't work. Before Lin Yuan caught Yao Fong, he tried to ask the sky demon like he asked the bird demon. But as long as it was a related question, before the sky demon could speak, it would collapse and then be reborn in the Nether Realm's black water. The result was the same after a dozen tries. Lin Yuan then went all over the monster forest to catch these sky demon. He wanted to see if there were any different results. Then tell me what you can say. Lin Yuan slowly coiled up and stared calmly at Yao Fong. Yao Fong's expression froze. This Black Jiao was a bit sinister. He had met his match. At the start, he directly stated his bottom line. He wasn't completely prepared to betray the sky demon. Because based on this trend, Lin Yuan definitely wouldn't let go of this sky demon who was willing to cooperate with him. Then, he would ask some questions. At first, Yao Fong was prepared to respond to Lin Yuan with half-truths and half-lies. Moreover, there were some questions that Lin Yuan might not be clear about. Therefore, Yao Fong gave the initiative to Lin Yuan. Perhaps the information leaked would be relatively small. As a result, Lin Yuan kicked the ball back to him and let him say it himself. I also don't know what the Dragon King is interested in. Let's talk about the elixir of immortality first. I think the Dragon King should have already gotten the real elixir of immortality and the defective elixir of immortality that we made in the northern frontier, right? The former is a metal bowl. Inside it is the blood of a primordial species. After taking this elixir of immortality, the soul will quickly deteriorate. From the pure soul of a living creature, it will turn into a monster similar to our sky demon. But it's only close. For example, it's almost like the relationship between a wolf and a dog. They can never reach the heights of our heavenly demon clan in their entire lives. At best, they can only be vicious dogs. But eternal life is indeed real. Our heavenly demon clan used the elixir of immortality, which has left behind legends in the myriad worlds. For example, in a small world, we once developed the elixir of immortality in the form of an elixir and the fountain of youth in the form of a liquid. As for the defective elixir of immortality, its effect is not even as good as the original elixir of immortality. It won't turn living creatures into monsters. It's similar to an addictive elixir. Once taken, the spirit will be greatly stimulated and you will feel as if you were dozens of years younger. But the essence of the elixir will not change. After taking the defective elixir of immortality, the evil thoughts in the heart of the person who took the elixir will be greatly increased. Perhaps it's something like obsession or ambition. Even if it's a flash in their heart, it will become a carrier of evil thoughts. Under the influence of this evil thought, they will do a lot of irrational things. In other words, they will put into practice an idea that they know is impossible. For example, once a cultivator breaks through a realm, he will feel that his power has skyrocketed. It's as if he is omnipotent. Those with a firm Taoist heart will quickly tell themselves that this is just a feeling of expansion brought about by the increase in power. It's an illusion. Then, they will stabilize their mind and regain their humble and cautious attitude to see the world. The effect of the defective elixir of immortality is the latter. It increases this feeling of expansion crazily and makes the person who takes the elixir feel that he is omnipotent. Chapter 570. At this point, Yao Feng wiped the sweat off his forehead. Most of what he said was true. He would only pause for a moment when it involved some confidential information and then fabricate it on the spot. For some reason, he felt that Lin Yuan knew everything. Or perhaps, even if Lin Yuan didn't know, he would have a way to verify it. Therefore, before he spoke, Yao Feng wanted to give Lin Yuan 30% truth and 70% lies. However, in front of Lin Yuan, he unknowingly revealed everything he knew. Only when it came to some crucial issues and the threat of death that lurked in his bloodline rose would he fall into a temporary state and change his words at the last minute. Oh. If that's the case, why do those people still worship the elixir of immortality so much? They clearly know that it's poison. Why do they spare no effort to promote it in the northern frontier and even publicly establish a protective umbrella? Lin Yuan's heterochromatic vertical pupils flashed with a cold light as he asked again. This was indeed something he couldn't understand. This was because the black liquid in this defective elixir of immortality had already lost its activity. Other than making the person who consumed it feel refreshed, it also constantly inflated the evil in their heart. The officials and aristocratic families of the northern frontier weren't easy to deal with. In other words, after several rounds of purges by Lin Yuan, those who were able to survive until now and occupy a place in the northern frontier weren't short-sighted people. In terms of ferocity, they weren't inferior to Sky Demon. After these people knew that they had been deceived, why would they still work for Sky Demon? If Lin Yuan was in the same position, even if he had to break his teeth, he would still bite off at least 2 pieces of flesh from the other party. After all, the elixir of immortality in the Jade Lake Divine Palace was a living example. Those cultivators who came to seek refuge all changed their physical bodies and appeared to be youths in their teens or 20s. A group of people who were smart enough to know that they had been fooled. Don't use excuses like Sky Demon was powerful and not to be trifled with. Lin Yuan's several purges in the northern frontier had clearly shown the aristocratic families in the northern frontier who was the real father. At the very beginning, there were still people who hoped that the Shenwu dynasty would conquer the Wei River, flatten the northern frontier, and end Lin Yuan's rule. However, after Lin Yuan's bloody purge, the aristocratic families on the northern frontier had completely lost their reverence for the Shenwu dynasty. They even sent many people to join the northern frontier army as staff officers, generals, and other positions. They launched a crazy attack on the armies of the Shenwu dynasty and the Shuangjin dynasty. No matter how powerful the foreign Sky Demon was, he still had to avoid Lin Yuan. The Sky Demon wasn't easy to deal with, but was Lin Yuan easy to deal with? Hee. This is what I meant by addiction. It's not that one will become addicted after taking a defective drug. It's just that the evil in one's heart will continue to swell. There is a limit to a human's soul and mind. If they don't continue to take this drug, they will go crazy. In addition, Sir Dragon King doesn't understand the morals of those who take the drug, right? They are all so old that even their grandchildren can start their own families. However, they are still greedy for power and position. They use the excuse that their elders are in charge so that their family won't decline or even have no descendants because of some wrong decisions. In reality, they are just unwilling to give power to the younger generation. How do you think an old man like him would be able to resist the temptation of eternal life? Moreover, these people don't have any morals to speak of. When they first found out that they were deceived, they were furious. They even wanted to go to the northern frontier prince's residence to expose us. However, those who actually took action were stopped and killed by the protective umbrella we set up. Those who didn't take action only shouted, but in their hearts, they still hoped to obtain the real elixir of immortality. That's why they were willing to cooperate with us. Moreover, even if they couldn't obtain the elixir of immortality, they wouldn't care. Humans are creatures with extremely bad natures. After they found out that they were deceived, they simply hardened their hearts and helped us deceive even more people. Firstly, they wanted to make sure that they weren't the only ones who suffered losses. Secondly, they wanted to leave a good impression with us and make us treat them as one of our own. Could it be that Sir Dragon King still has any extravagant hopes for these kinds of people? Yao Fong spread out his hands with a helpless expression on his face. Lin Yuan was silent for a moment. Then, he nodded slightly. Because this kind of statement was indeed reasonable. Humans were inherently bad natures. Even their best friends were the same. If you lived a much better life than them, they might sincerely wish you well and hope that you lived a better life. Of course, they would still feel some envy in their hearts. However, if you lived a slightly better life than them, they would even be more vicious than outsiders. They would hope that you could think of a way to make their lives better. If you couldn't do that, they would even use all kinds of methods to trip you up and make you return to your original state. True friends weren't easy to make. A person could only meet a few in their lifetime. When the Sky Demon set his sights on the entire northern frontier, this result was already destined. Evil thoughts overflowed. I suffered a loss and was deceived. What right do you have to stay out of this? So, this kind of defective elixir of immortality can't be saved. Lin Yuan's rock skin twitched slightly. A murderous intent flashed through his eyes. No wonder when he released a large number of controlled Sky Demon all over the northern frontier, they couldn't sense the existence of their own kind at all. It turned out that the so-called protective umbrella wasn't formed by the Sky Demon who had taken the elixir of immortality. It was a group of humans who had taken the elixir of immortality. Lei Chuxing probably hadn't eaten anything similar because he was the Sky Demon's strategic partner. Moreover, he was ambitious and ruthless. He wouldn't desire this so-called immortality. Let alone a defective elixir of immortality, he wouldn't even be interested in it. Therefore, at the crucial moment, Lei Chuxing was able to jump out and counterattack the Sky Demon. Not only did he not act according to plan, he even pushed the Shenwu dynasty's army to attack the Frost Mirror cavalry. Again, there weren't many creatures like this. Incubus was one, and Lei Chuxing was another. Lin Yuan couldn't give any other examples. Lin Yuan guessed that Su Nan was most likely the one who had taken the defective elixir of immortality. However, he didn't reveal this secret, causing Li Zhong and the others to mistakenly think that Su Nan was the same as Lei Chuxing. They were both strategic partners of the Sky Demon and didn't care about the elixir of immortality. They were purely dissatisfied with Lin Yuan's continuous checks and balances. Then, under these circumstances, they colluded with the Sky Demon. Now, it seemed that Su Nan's style was completely due to the fact that the defective elixir of immortality had inflated his evil thoughts. Therefore, Su Nan slowly put his bold ideas into practice. He also used the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce as a foundation to make things easier for the Sky Demon. This was the reason why the protective umbrella existed. Chapter 571. There's Hope. Yao Feng nodded affirmatively again and said in a low voice, "Actually, the side effects of this immortality medicine are all mental. If the user doesn't take the medicine for a long time, they will feel weak and mentally weak. They might even feel that they're not far from death. However, that's just their own psychological effects. If they don't take the medicine, they will only feel uncomfortable for a period of time." Lin Yuan's eyes showed that he was deep in thought. He asked, "So, the so-called addiction is because they want to eat it? If they can overcome their own psychological effects, they can get rid of this negative state. Theoretically, it's like this." Yao Feng nodded slightly to express her affirmation of Lin Yuan's words. Then, she changed the topic. But this is just a theory. If it's someone with a strong will, it might be possible. However, how many people with a strong will are willing to take the immortality medicine? They're afraid of death, so they take the immortality medicine. If they feel that they'll die if they don't take the medicine, can they really not take it? Lin Yuan, although he didn't know why, he felt that this sky demon's words made a lot of sense. If they're afraid of death, then they'll take the immortality medicine. If they think that they'll die if they don't take the medicine, can they really not take it? Even if Lin Yuan told them how to quit the defective immortality medicine, it would be meaningless. Because they wouldn't believe him. Even if they believed him, they wouldn't have enough willpower to withstand the side effects of not taking the medicine. Why would someone with a strong will take this thing? The Dragon King's idea is only theoretically feasible. But then again, the defective elixir of immortality stimulates the evil in people's hearts and inflates the person who takes the elixir. It's like a balloon that keeps inflating until it reaches the limit of its carrying capacity and explodes. But at this point, the person has no value. If he dies, then so be it. We won't lose anything. Because of the existence of such people, more and more people will take the defective immortality medicine. We won't fall into a situation where we have no one to use. In addition, it's still the same example. These people are like balloons. Every time they take the medicine, they'll be inflated. Correspondingly, their evil will grow bigger and bigger. When they can't suppress it anymore, they'll do things that support their evil will. As the number of times they take the medicine increases, their evil will grow bigger and their willpower will become weaker and weaker. Therefore, the interval between taking the medicine will become shorter and shorter. From taking the medicine once a month to taking the medicine once every 3 to 5 days is a very fast process. As their willpower grows weaker and weaker, their evil will grow stronger and stronger. The more this happens, the harder it is for them to quit. The backlash from their evil will isn't something that their weak willpower can withstand. At this stage, it's like a fool's dream to quit. Almost all of them will collapse under the backlash of their evil will. If they don't go crazy, they'll commit suicide. Yao Feng's lips curled up slightly. She said with a fake smile, "It's because of this desire that the originally well-hidden umbrella was exposed to the Dragon King." Several batches of immortality medicine were intercepted by the Northern Battlefront Army. The people who couldn't get the immortality medicine are getting crazier and crazier. If the Dragon King doesn't guide them carefully, it might be a raging inferno. Lin Yuan, another riot among the aristocratic families in the northern frontier. Although the northern frontier's current strength wasn't unbearable, that was when the northern frontier was in its prime. Now, many officials in the northern frontier, and many officers in the northern frontier army could be drug users. If a fight really broke out, it would be impossible to tell who was the enemy and who was the ally. The overwhelming power couldn't be exerted at all. Who knows what crazy things those drug users could do? A raging inferno. It wasn't impossible. If it was any other time, it would be fine. But at this juncture, the Shuangjin dynasty and the Qingjiang dynasty were eyeing covetously. There must be someone in the Xinwu dynasty who was controlled by the immortality medicine. Plus, there was the sky demon who would invade at any time. The northern frontier was now surrounded by wolves. If there was another civil war, even the Daluo Golden Immortals couldn't save the situation. You mean? Lin Yuan opened his mouth. There was a hint of struggle in his eyes. Yao Fong nodded slightly and said with a smile, "It's just as the Dragon King thinks. I can provide the Dragon King with the immortality medicine and let him control these drug users. But I hope that the Dragon King can open the market for the immortality medicine. I can guarantee that these defective products won't fall into the hands of those who haven't taken them before. But the prerequisite is that the Dragon King can control the other sky demons scattered in the monster forest and ensure that they won't mix into this market. This will allow the number of drug users to continue increasing." Speaking up to this point, the smile on Yao Fong's face became more confident. She said in a low voice, "I think the Dragon King has already considered this point. That's why he spared our lives. Because, from the start, you didn't have any other choice, right?" Lin Yuan sighed and didn't continue Yao Fong's words. Was Yao Fong right? She was right. These drug users didn't have any self-control. Cutting off their supply at this time was forcing them to rebel. But knowing the dangers of the immortality medicine, Lin Yuan wanted to convince himself to open the market for the immortality medicine. This was still a problem. Even if he walked the path of godhood, his soul was still that of a human. A human had a bottom line. His eyes narrowed slightly, and the emotionless heterochromatic eyes stared at Yao Fong. At this moment, Yao Fong felt that the world in front of her had turned black and white again. Killing intent. Endless killing intent. The smile on Yao Fong's face slowly disappeared. Large amounts of cold sweat seeped out of his forehead. The rumored Black Jiao wasn't someone who was easy to talk to. He wasn't someone who was willing to suffer losses. He was now afraid that Lin Yuan would disregard everything and fight to the death. At that time, it was hard to say what would happen to the northern frontier, but he would definitely die. After a while, Lin Yuan sighed again. He narrowed his eyes and said, "But the problem is, how can I believe you?" Hearing Lin Yuan's words, Yao Fong was shocked. He didn't dare to continue being pretentious. He said in a low voice, "Dragon King, I can prove my allegiance. Although my position in the northern frontier isn't as high as the first generation, as one of the oldest sky demon, I know most of the plans. I can give you a list of people under the umbrella. Although it's not comprehensive, I know all 4 people in charge." Oh. Hearing the 4 people in charge match Su Nan's statement, Lin Yuan said with interest, "Then tell me about it first." Chapter 572. Su Nan. Shi Dong. Qiao Yilin. Zhang Qilin. Yao Fong didn't dare to be pretentious. Under the pressure from Lin Yuan, he quickly spat out 4 names. In today's northern frontier, these 4 simple names signified power. Any one of these 4 people could cause an earthquake in the entire northern frontier with a stomp of their feet. Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce Chairman Su Nan. Demon Emperor Association's Intelligence Agency Head Shi Dong. Northern Frontier's biggest family's representative Qiao Yilin. Northern Frontier's only army's commander Zhang Qilin. Lin Yuan's eyelids twitched slightly. Although Su Nan's exposure had made him clear that the identities of the remaining 3 people in charge were not simple, Lin Yuan's initial idea was completely different from what Yao Fong had said. At first, he thought that it would be a 1 versus 2 situation, but in the end, Yao Fong had directly turned it into a bomb. Lin Yuan took a while to calm himself down. He looked at Yao Fong with a cold face and said, "You must know that although your operation is quite efficient, the northern frontier's main forces haven't been damaged. In other words, I still have the final say in the northern frontier. Even if these 4 people join forces, they won't be able to withstand a single round from me. Do you understand? Yao Fong held the mentality of going all out. He patted his chest and said in a deep voice, "Dragon King, don't worry. I will take full responsibility for my words." The first generation might have left a trick up his sleeve. There might not be only 4 people in charge, but I can be sure that these 4 people are all drug users. Moreover, they have taken the drug many times. They are the type that can't be kicked. When he said this, Yao Fong's heart was a little uneasy. After all, although these 4 people couldn't be compared to Li Zhong's right-hand men, they were definitely the pillars of the northern frontier. For them to suddenly defect to Lin Yuan's side was no different from slapping Lin Yuan's face. Furthermore, the number of important characters that had been roped in were not just these 4. The Sky Demon had always been cruel and cunning. Even when facing his own kind, he would scheme and scheme against others. It was very normal for him to have a hand in such a big matter. In fact, even Li Zhong could be a drug user. It was just that Yao Fong didn't dare to voice her conjecture out loud. After all, Li Zhong was the king of the northern frontier, and he wasn't the kind of northern frontier king who was completely overthrown by Lin Yuan. When Lin Yuan wasn't around, Li Zhong had the right to make all the decisions in the northern frontier, big or small. Although the undercurrents in the northern frontier were concealed well, it wouldn't be right to say that Li Zhong didn't know anything about it. After all, without their own request, no one in power would allow a faction to appear under them to go against them. When such a malignant tumor appeared, there were only 2 paths. One was to be immediately eradicated, and the other was to pay a heavy price and become the lackey of the person in power. There was no chance for them to do anything big. Are you sure that Zhang Qilin and Sherdong are the same? Lin Yuan's eyes were still slightly narrowed as he threw out another question. Yao Fong was slightly startled. She quickly recalled that the exposure of the protective umbrella this time was caused by Zhang Qilin jumping out and seizing a large amount of defective elixirs of immortality. And this series of actions seemed to have Sherdong's shadow behind it. This, for a moment, Yao Fong didn't know how to answer Lin Yuan. The exposure of the defective elixirs of immortality and the protective umbrella were the work of these 2 people. But now that she thought about it, these 2 people seemed to be standing on their side. And they were the type that would never be able to kick their drug addiction. Did these 2 people want to go crazy or die? Before she could divert her thoughts, Yao Fong was quickly brought back to reality by Lin Yuan's cold gaze. Her scalp tingled as she said, "I can guarantee this with my life." Because the defective elixirs of immortality were all refined by the first generation and then sent to the Sky Demon who was in charge of the various settlements. Who came to take the elixirs, how much they took, and who ended up in the hands of these elixirs in the end, we all know in our hearts. And Sherdong and Zhang Qilin are the pillars of the northern frontier. Even if they wanted to defect, we wouldn't dare to believe it. Speaking up to here, Yao Fong seemed to have thought of something. Her eyes flashed as she quickly said, "Yes, I remember now. They all ate the defective elixirs in front of the first generation. We all saw it with our own eyes." Lin Yuan's eyelids twitched. What was this? Internal strife? Conspiracy? Or sacrifice themselves for justice? He really didn't think that Sherdong and Zhang Qilin would have much loyalty to him. For Sherdong, who was promoted by him and given more power, it was fine. But Zhang Qilin, who was loyal to Lei Qiuxing, definitely didn't have much loyalty to him. If it wasn't for the fact that he was worried that Zhang Qilin would betray him, why would he leave the Northern Frontier Army, the earliest and most elite army in the Northern Frontier? Safety. What a joke. The Northern Frontier was Lin Yuan's back. Why would he dare to break down the city walls of the Northern Frontier? This would make it easier to plan the city and expand the city. But more importantly, the northern frontier was right next to the monster forest. The ferocious monsters in the Hingduan mountain range could run through the forests, basins, and plains without any obstacles. Just how terrifying was that? The northern frontier actually didn't need any army to guard it. Lin Yuan could even confidently say that unless the Heaven's Gate was lost and the monsters on the other side of the Heaven's Gate invaded, even the Shinwu dynasty at its peak wouldn't be able to take down the tough bone that was the northern frontier under the protection of the Hingduan mountain range. In the past, Lin Yuan would still be worried about the opinions of the other 6 empires. But now, none of this was a problem. All the top forces had become familiar with Lin Yuan. When they reached an agreement, they also expressed their willingness to accept Lin Yuan into their circle. With the support of these big shots, even if the other 6 empires were dissatisfied, they would have to think about whether they were powerful enough. Even if things got out of hand, the Shuangjin dynasty and the Shinwu dynasty had already fought against each other. The only one that could threaten Lin Yuan was the Qingjiang dynasty. But even if the 3 empires joined forces, Lin Yuan and the Monster King Palace might not be able to win, but they would still be able to put up a fight. The worst that could happen was that both sides would be heavily injured and die together. In Lin Yuan's eyes, the Northern Frontier Army was like a training ground for the other armies. It was the #1 blade against the outside world. Keeping the blade in the sheath at a critical moment was out of caution. After all, the handle of the blade was in Zhang Qilin's hands. He wouldn't be able to see anything wrong with it for a day or 2. But if the key was to fight against a general who could change sides at any time, it would be hard to say who the blade would be pointed at. Chapter 573. Seeing that Lin Yuan was deep in thought, Yao Feng opened his mouth, but he didn't dare to disturb Lin Yuan. He could only put on a bitter face and start to think about the strangeness of the situation. The immortal elixirs were seized and the umbrella was exposed. It wasn't because Lin Yuan's subordinates reacted quickly. Instead, it was because their own people suddenly turned around and stabbed them in the vitals. Furthermore, it was a critical hit. The amount of immortal elixirs that first generation could produce was actually quite limited. It was enough to supply the northern frontier market, but as the trade gradually expanded, the situation where the supply couldn't meet the demand didn't appear. However, the consumption had started to catch up with the production. After all, this kind of defective immortal elixir was addictive. The frequency of users taking the elixirs would increase, and the quantity would also increase. In this way, not only were the previous stocks mostly sold out, but the subsequent defective products would also be sold out the moment they came out of the market. It wasn't that the demand of the users had reached such a stage. Instead, as time passed, the users had gradually realized this drawback. Some of the smarter ones had already started to stockpile the elixirs for themselves. Firstly, it was to prepare for an emergency. Secondly, it was to stock up for profit. Once there was a shortage of immortal elixirs, they would immediately raise the price by 100 or even 1,000 times. They would use the excess immortal elixirs in their hands to create a business that was even more profitable than Lin Yuan's monopoly of the Fey market. After all, most of the users had this kind of background. Even those who hadn't been in charge for long had family experience. And this time, Shi Dong and Zhang Qilin had joined hands. Not only had they seized a large amount of immortal elixirs, but they had also directly sealed off some private trading channels. After all, they were all on the same side. They were very clear about these trading locations and methods. If they really wanted to crack down on this matter, it wouldn't be that difficult. The umbrella was exposed because those users who didn't stockpile defective immortal elixirs were causing trouble. After all, after Zhang Qilin joined hands with Shi Dong, they hadn't received any elixirs for at least half a month. Normally, they would go around the streets, begging everyone to get some immortal elixirs to solve their urgent needs. But at this juncture, even if they wanted to profit, they had to see if the situation was clear, right? Regardless of whether the people who had taken the elixir of immortality or not, all of them refused to help these people. As a result, the situation became more and more serious. Finally, even existences like Li Zhong and Lin Yuan, who stood at the top of the northern frontier pyramid, could no longer hold themselves back and began to clean up the northern frontier. But why? Yao Fang and Lin Yuan were thinking about the same thing. Can I understand this as another trap within a trap? Last time, that first generation of yours came to steal a beam and replace it with someone else, throwing all of the forces he had painstakingly gathered in the south into the Battle of Wei River. 80% of the Sky Demon and inferior races were captured by us, to the extent where a certain expert from your Sky Demon race was seriously injured and went into hiding. Meanwhile, this battle seemed stupid and dangerous, but the result was that your first generation used the method of disappearing to silently infiltrate our northern frontier, allowing himself to hide in the relatively stable northern frontier from the Shenwu dynasty's central plains and southern regions that were about to become the center of a storm. Moreover, before this, he had already set up a trap in the northern frontier, corrupting a large number of officials, aristocratic families, and even the pillars of the northern frontier. Under these preconditions, after he confirmed that he had achieved his goal, would he abandon the rook to save the king? Would he have me focus all of my attention on you scattered Sky Demon and those people who consumed the defective immortality medicine? Lin Yuan muttered to himself, but his eyes gradually brightened, his tone gradually rising. This type of first-rate schemer and second-rate wise person all have a common point, and that is, when a plan is useful, they always like to repeat the same work, forever unable to escape those rules and regulations. In that case, your first generation is planning to escape, right? When his voice fell, Yao Fang's expression had already completely sunk. Was Lin Yuan right? There was an 80% chance that he was right. From the perspective of an old Sky Demon who had lived for tens of thousands of years, this first generation was rather immature. If he was in charge, he definitely wouldn't have taken the initiative to expose his existence in order to escape the impending storm. Just by this operation of escaping to the northern frontier, this fellow had used up his greatest trump card, and at the same time, he had also ruined all of the efforts that the Jade Lake Celestial Palace had put in during this period of time in the south. The reason why the Shenwu dynasty was still able to maintain the state of war and deadlock was all thanks to the inferior Sky Demon that had been corrupted by him. In other words, it was the aristocratic families, nobles, and sects of the Shenwu dynasty that stubbornly held on. If it wasn't for this move, perhaps all of the turmoil in the Shenwu dynasty would have collapsed without a fight, and the so-called storm wouldn't have come at all. Now that Lin Yuan had displayed a method that could kill the Sky Demon, this first generation was clearly afraid and actually wanted to use the same trick again, sacrificing all of his arrangements in the northern frontier to fight for a chance to escape. But, was this possible? Yao Fang couldn't help but admit that in terms of strategy in the northern frontier, this move of the first generation could be considered a lucky hit. After all, once the turmoil of the drug users erupted, even if Lin Yuan had the strongest trump card in his hands, he would still be flustered for a while. After all, the drug users were fundamentally still humans. Lin Yuan couldn't possibly kill all of the humans in the northern frontier just to eliminate the threat, right? Even if Lin Yuan caught a Sky Demon like him who was willing to cooperate, it would be useless. This was because the number of drug users abandoned by the first generation might be even more terrifying than what he had previously known. Therefore, the list of names that the Sky Demon spoke of was both true and false. There wasn't an absolutely correct plan at all. If he wanted to get rid of these drug users, it would really be a painstaking effort. However, painstaking effort was just painstaking effort. In the end, the Sky Demon and the drug users scattered in the northern frontier would never be able to fight against the true power of the northern frontier. Being completely eliminated was their only ending. Yao Fang's heart went slightly cold. He sighed helplessly and said in a low voice, "Yes, the possibility is very high." He suddenly realized something. He didn't have the qualifications to pity those drug users. Because in the first generation's plan, he was also an abandoned chess piece. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and asked again, "That's right, you said that you can help me control the drug users. Could it be that you can also make that defective elixir of immortality?" From your confident tone before, it seems that as long as I can control the other scattered sky demon and ensure that the things in their hands don't enter the northern frontier market, you can eat this plate yourself. That's not it. Yao Fang shook his head very honestly. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.